Chapter 600. It was just an empty threat. Nong Si did not take it seriously. I've already made it very clear. Please reconsider your choice. That's right, working with you is the result of my insistence. However, if I'm no longer the patriarch because of this, then our cooperation will naturally end. Moreover, I think that even if there's a new patriarch, they won't work with you anymore. After all, cooperation requires both sides to work hard. The threat in Nong Si's words was very obvious. Cooperation required both sides to work hard, and also required both sides to display their strength. If Long Qi did not have the strength, the outcome would be obvious. Long Qi's expression was very ugly at this moment. He wanted to wave his hand and say that if they did not want to cooperate, then so be it. After all, he had the channels to purchase goods and sufficient funds. However, these were not enough for a businessman. What they needed more was a strong sales network. Coincidentally, these were the things that the Sorangan family had and were good at. If he left them, perhaps Long Qi could continue to operate independently. However, it would take a long time to reach a scale. For the sake of money, Long Qi could not make such a brainless decision. Long Qi's expression changed again and again. He smiled very sincerely. Mr. Patriarch, what are you doing? I was just joking. Just as you said, since we are now citizens of Laos, and we are paying business tax, I think they should be more than happy to help us out when we have a problem, right? Long Qi changed his words, or rather, he was forced to change his words. Since the situation was not good, he had no choice but to lower his head. Nong Si smiled in satisfaction. I was just joking with Mr. Long. Since that's the case, when do you think we should talk to the mercenaries about this? This matter cannot be rushed. The mercenaries do big things. How about this, let me contact them first. I'll give you an answer a day later, Long Qi replied with a smile. He had not contacted Yun Ke for a long time. Now, he did not even know where he was. How could he meet him just because he wanted to? Knowing that Long Qi was going to use his connections, Nong Si's goal was achieved. He smiled and left the state preceptor's residence. In the following time, Long Qi immediately sent out his men. He needed to know where Yun Ke was. Where was Yun Ke? Of course, he was in Wanxiang City. However, as an agent of the Security Bureau, his whereabouts had always been difficult to track. Unless he wanted to meet someone else, it was too difficult to find him except for a limited number of people. It would be difficult for Long Qi to find Skylark. But what he didn't know was that Skylark was paying attention to him. He even got the news that Nong Si went to the Long residence. You're finally anxious? Very good. After hearing his subordinate's report, Skylark's face was filled with a victorious smile. Half a day had passed, but there was still no news about Skylark. It wasn't that his men didn't benefit from it, but the mercenaries were an impenetrable force, and outsiders had no chance to talk to them. They couldn't just go to the camp of the mercenaries or the provincial government to look for them openly, right? If that was the case, it wouldn't be looking for someone, but seeking death. Men, prepare a carriage. We're going to General He's residence. Long Qi had no choice but to rely on his old face to do the job. No matter what, He Guang only joined the mercenaries because of his introduction, so he owed him a favor. However, Long Qi knew that this was the only time he could do this. The next time he had something to do, it was hard to say if He Guang would be willing to meet him. Long Qi was quite lucky. He Guang had just returned from killing bandits outside. After the servant reported, a guard walked out of the residence and led Long Qi to the depths of the residence. In front of the guard, Long Qi also lowered his posture. From this point, it could be seen that he was very clear about his identity. Usually, people like this wouldn't be detestable. In the living room, He Guang met Long Qi. After not seeing him for almost 3 months, He Guang had a colder and more murderous aura. Fortunately, when he saw Long Qi, he intentionally restrained his murderous aura and showed a warm side. State Preceptor Long, please don't, General He. In the future, you can just call me Mr. Long. Long Qi didn't dare to be arrogant and refused repeatedly. Okay, Mr. Long. How do you have time to come to my residence? He Guang laughed. He was very satisfied with Long Qi's intentional lowering of his status. Sigh, it's a long story. Long Qi said while observing He Guang with the corner of his eyes, waiting for him to ask him. Otherwise, if he took the initiative to ask and was rejected, it would be too embarrassing. He Guang was very respectful and asked with a smile, Mr. Long, do you have any other troubles? You put down your political affairs and focus on being a rich man. This is something that I can't ask for. Long Qi shook his head. General He, you only see the glamorous side of me. You don't know that business is not so easy. You also know that I'm working with the Sorangan family. Not long ago. He Guang sat in his seat with a serious face. When he heard that someone had robbed a merchant ship on the Mekong River, he couldn't help but frown. He wasn't faking it. He was really angry at the audacity of the Phnom Penh Dynasty's General Hun Senator. The current He Guang could be described as a different person than he used to be. With the power of 30,000 soldiers in his hand, he became the representative of the local forces in Laos. Of course, this representative was not self-appointed. The locals were willing to ask him for help. In front of the mercenaries, he didn't dare to call himself the leader of any other forces. This was especially true for the current governor of Laos, Wuxia Xianxia. Although he was young, he was decisive in his actions. In less than 2 months, 7 officials had died in his hands because of crimes, and more than 30 officials had been exiled and sentenced to death. It was this decisive killing that made the politics of Laos become clear. The dark things of the past had disappeared. After all, no one would joke about their own life. With the military power in his hands, He Guang was even more careful in his actions. Even when others came to him for help, he knew what he could ask and what he couldn't do. Otherwise, he would be in deep trouble and unable to save himself. He knew more and had more dealings with the mercenaries. He had met Wuxia Xianxia more than once to discuss the future of Laos. This made him understand what the young man's idea was. The young man wanted to build a strong Laos. This strong Laos would not only have a strong reputation, but also allow the people here to live a rich life. In ancient times, the feudal dynasties were divided into ranks. Laos was also divided into ranks. To be specific, the Han people were the first, and the other foreign races were second, third, or even lower. Wuxia Xianxia wanted to lead all the people on the road to wealth, so that they wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing. Such an ambition was easy to say, but it was very difficult to achieve. Since ancient times, many people with great talents and great foresight had such a goal. However, no matter how hard they worked, there would always be people who didn't have enough to eat or wear warm clothes. It was obvious how difficult it was to achieve wealth together. Wuxia Xianxia had the intention to do this. In his words, as long as the people were willing to work hard and endure hardships, they wouldn't starve. Especially since the potato was a high-yield crop and had been widely planted. If they were lazy, they would be sent to reform through labor. In any case, the people had to be hardworking, and in exchange, they would also become rich. The real people were naturally able to endure hardships. In the past, even if they endured hardships, they wouldn't necessarily have a good harvest. However, under Wuxia Xianxia's leadership, the lives of those who could endure hardships began to change. After all, Laos was going through a huge change, and there was a lot of work to be done. Even if he worked hard to build houses and roads, the remuneration he earned was enough to feed his family. Under Wuxia Xianxia's leadership, Laos was changing day by day. Following that, the young governor began to focus on the treatment and fairness of the people. With Yang Bao, who could complain about any injustice, there were fewer cases of people bullying others. The people could earn more money and live better lives. They could also gain more respect in terms of human rights. This was all brought about by Wuxia Xianxia. As the main representative of the natives of Laos, He Guang naturally saw all of this. This also allowed him to have a better understanding of Wuxia Xianxia's governing philosophy. Wuxia Xianxia was his direct superior, so how could he do his job well if he didn't figure it out? After understanding all of this, and hearing Nong Si's story, he had a feeling that Yuan Shaochen would do something about it. As he had said, they were now legal citizens of Laos, and had paid taxes. Now that there was a problem outside, how could the Laos government ignore it? Okay, I understand. I will find a chance to report it to the higher-ups. He Guang hesitated for a moment, but he didn't make any promises. After all, this matter involved the Kim Bien dynasty. Although the mercenaries were powerful, they had taken down Jiaoji and Lansang kingdoms. Now was the time to digest the fruits of their labor. Who knew if there would be more problems? Long Qi knew that He Guang's current position was a little awkward. With a new master, he had to worry too much about what he said. Long Qi didn't press him too much, and instead, he cupped his fist to express his gratitude. After staying for a while, he left the He mansion. Yunk was in Yang Chendong's mansion, discussing the next step. Since the plan had already started, there was no reason to stop. Chapter 601. Report. The Security Bureau just sent news that Long Qi went to the He family's residence and left after an hour. Tiger's Mane walked into the study and reported to Yang Chendong, who was looking at the sand table. Got it. Yang Chendong nodded and said, pack up. We will head to Wulong City tomorrow morning. Not only was Tiger Edge stunned by this order, but even Skylark, who was analyzing the situation, was also stunned. Wulong City was a big city in Siam that was very close to Lao province. It was less than 300 miles away from Wansheng City. However, it was still within Siam's territory. Why did the sixth young master want to go there? The two of them could not figure out the meaning of this step. However, since it was the sixth young master's intention, they had to carry it out. Tiger's Mane nodded and left. Yun Kei, who was left behind, quickly looked at Wulong City on the sand table and fell into deep thought. He lowered his head for the time it took for an incense stick to burn. Then, he suddenly shouted, I know, sixth young master is preparing to, shoo. Yang Chendong smiled at Yun Kei and nodded, that's right. I am preparing to go to war with Siam. As for the extent of the war, it depends on the attitude of the other party. The sixth young master. Isn't this too risky? After all, we don't have a lot of troops. If we do this, it will be equivalent to going to war on two fronts. Although Yun Kei believed in the strength of the mercenaries, he could not help but worry when he thought about how the enemy this time was much stronger than Jiaoji and Lansang nation. This young master knows, but there will only be progress if there is a challenge. Otherwise, wouldn't it be too boring to always suppress others and beat the weak with strength? Alright, this matter is only known to the few of us. Don't tell Xiao Chen. The young master is looking forward to seeing how he will perform in such a situation, Yang Chendong said with interest. Yun Kei saw all of this and he was very envious. What did Yuan Shaochen do to deserve such attention from the sixth young master? Let's hope that he can have a perfect performance this time. Once he passes this test, his future will be limitless. Not only did he not let Yuan Shaochen know that Yang Chendong secretly went to Wulong City, but Yang Chendong also did not show any interest in the matter of the Solangan family. He did not say that all of this was arranged by himself. He just wanted to see if the governor whom he had promoted had the ability to handle things. Although the other party was too young, the sixth young master's heart was still filled with hope. After a night of thinking, He Guang went to the provincial government early the next morning. He came to report to the governor, Yuan Shaochen, about the results of the Laotian mercenary army and the problems in the province. As the governor, Yuan Shaochen was not only in charge of the civil affairs, but also the military. This made him very busy, but also greatly increased his power. For example, if one were to take control of the military and government at the same time, it might cause problems in peacetime. However, in an unstable and dangerous place, such a method of centralizing power in one person was still necessary. At the very least, it would save a lot of unnecessary wrangling. Compared to 2 months ago, Yuan Shaochen was thinner and more tanned, but he looked more energetic. After the attendant invited He Guang into the office, he held a piece of paper in his hand and asked 7 or 8 questions. This was one of the methods Yang Chendong used to train them. A good memory was not as good as a bad pen. When He Guang came, he was very clear about the situation of the army. Naturally, he answered all the questions without showing any panic. About an hour later, the questions were answered. Luan Xiaochen nodded with satisfaction. General He, thank you for your hard work. Laotian is going to be a period of great development in Laotian. We absolutely cannot allow any chaos in public security. So, please don't relax and keep an eye on things. If you find any problems, solve them immediately. If you can't solve them, just report to me. Yes, Governor Luan, don't worry. I know what to do. He Guang's attitude was very humble. He did not dare to call himself a general in front of Luan Xiaochen. After the work report, Luan Xiaochen picked up the tea on the desk and took a sip. Subconsciously, she reminded He Guang that he could leave. Usually, at this time, the subordinates would immediately stand up and leave with the excuse that they still had work to do. However, this time, He Guang did not do so. Instead, he said tentatively, Governor Luan, I have something that I should report to you. What is it? Luan Xiaochen was a straightforward person. He was too busy with work. If he was not too busy, he would not ask He Guang to leave immediately. Because in a while, it would be time for the next person to report. It wouldn't be good to chat with others while drinking tea and delaying the main work. Since he had made up his mind, He Guang no longer hesitated. Instead, he used the simplest and most concise words to explain the matter that Long Qi had told him. After saying this, he immediately shut his mouth. He could pass on the message, but it was not up to him to make the final decision. He originally thought it was a military matter. He did not expect that the citizens involved were treated unfairly in other countries. This was the first time he encountered such a matter. For a moment, Luan Xiaochen did not know how to deal with it. However, his intuition told him that it was not a small matter. Okay, I understand. How about this, I will go to General He's residence tonight. Speaking of which, I have been here for more than 2 months, but I have been busy and did not visit your wife. It is very rude of me. And, when the time comes, I would like to ask General He to invite the people involved. I want to hear their words. Luan Xiaoli's face was full of smiles. When He Guang heard this, he was excited. Yes, then this general will be waiting for the governor's arrival tonight. What do you mean by not arriving? He said that he was just going to walk around casually. Don't make such a big commotion. Luan Xiaochen was still smiling, but the reminder in his words was very obvious. That was, he wanted to keep the matter of him going to the He residence as low-key as possible. Don't let everyone know. He Guang immediately understood Luan Xiaochen's meaning. The other party did not want to make a big commotion before making a decision. He immediately nodded. Yes, Governor Luan is right. We are just going to walk around in private. We will not disturb others. Very good. Then I will trouble General He to go and prepare. After He Guang left, Luan Xiaochen intentionally stood up to send him off. This gave He Guang a fright. He quickly said, Governor Luan, please stay. However, the moment the door closed, He Guang's bent body immediately straightened. This was the first time the governor personally sent him off after he reported his work. Although it was just for show, it was already a big improvement. It proved that his actions had caught the other party's attention. This was definitely a good start. It seems that I did the right thing by reporting this matter. I'll go back now and bring Long Qi and that Ta Nong Si over. I'll tell them what they can say and what they can't say when they meet Governor Luan tonight. He Guang muttered to himself as he walked out of the building. In the office, Luan Xiaochen had already closed his eyes and leaned against the back of the chair. Early this morning, he received the decision of the 6th young master to go on patrol. Therefore, when such a problem arose, it was impossible for him to ask for advice. Thinking about what Beta Persei said in the letter, the 6th young master said that you should work as you should, as long as everything is reasonable and legal. If anything happens, he will take care of it. This was not as simple as just saying. Wuxia Xianxia knew that since the sixth young master said it, he could really do it. Even so, if he asked for advice on everything, he would be too narrow-minded. It's just the Phnom Penh dynasty. Daring to touch the caravan of Lao province is tantamount to provoking the Lao provincial government. Even so, it is absolutely impossible for the other party to not give an explanation. Otherwise, if they attack the caravan this time, I am afraid they will attack us next time. After making a general decision in his heart, Wuxia Xianxia opened his eyes again. At this time, there were footsteps outside the door. It was the next official to be received. He mansion. Today, after He Guang came back, the He residents began to clean up. Then, his personal guards were sent out one by one to be responsible for the safety of the surrounding streets. In short, Governor Wan came to his residence to give him face. Then, he absolutely could not have any problems, not even the slightest bit. When the sky just turned dark, Long Qi and Nong Si appeared at the door of He mansion. Sure enough, they were traveling light. Each of them had only brought a personal attendant with them. It was not as simple as what the messenger had said, that they did not cause any commotion. At this time, Nong Si was very excited. Even when he arrived at He Guang's mansion, he still felt like he was in the clouds. Originally, he thought that after forcing Long Qi, even if he would think of a way, there would not be a result so quickly. After all, this person had already retired from the position of state preceptor. Moreover, he was a minister of the previous dynasty. Seriously speaking, it was already good that he was not punished. But who would have thought that the other party really found General He Guang? What was even more unexpected was that the matter had already been reported to Governor Wan. Who was Governor Wan? Although he had the title of governor, there was no difference between him and the previous king of Lansang Kingdom, Piaci. Chapter 602. It was rumored that Governor Wan was very young and his future was limitless. If he could establish a good relationship with him, would the Sorangan family still have to worry about the future? He had asked around and found out that many big shots in Lansang wanted to meet Wuxia Xianxia and have a meal with him. However, they had no way to do so. Now, he had done it. From the moment he received the news, he wanted to shout out to the entire Lansang nation, no. It should be said that everyone in Laos knew about it. However, considering that He Guang had told him to keep a low profile, he suppressed his excitement and followed Long Ping to the He residence. The moment he entered the He manor and saw He Guang, Nong Si had a very respectful look. To him, it was rare to be able to establish a good relationship with He Guang. Alright, Governor Wan will be here soon. Whatever he asks, just answer. If you don't know, don't say anything. He Guang reminded with a dark face. Of course, these words were mainly directed at Nong Si. Long Qi had been a state teacher before and knew what to do better than him. Yes, yes. Nong Si was an understanding person, so he kept nodding. Alright, then we'll stand here and wait for Governor Wan to come. After He Guang finished speaking, he stood there in a very standard military posture, giving people the feeling that Governor Wan would appear in front of him at any time. Long Qi and Nong Si naturally didn't dare to say anything. They also stood behind He Guang and waited. Fortunately, this didn't last very long. In less than an hour, a soldier in armor ran over. Seeing this soldier appear, He Guang's face turned serious. He turned around and said softly, "He's here." Then he turned around and looked into the distance until a group of people slowly appeared. Wuxia Xianxia also kept a low profile this time. Other than himself, there were only 6 Ling Feng guards. After becoming the governor of a province, Yang Qindong gave him the standard of a squad of guards. However, he would not bring all of them with him. Usually, he would only bring 4 to 6 people with him when he took a break. Greetings, Governor Wan. Seeing that Wuxia Xianxia was about to appear in front of his residence, He Guang had already stepped forward to welcome him with a fawning expression. His attitude was completely different from He Long Qi and Nong Si's earlier attitude. General I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. I had some business to deal with at the last minute, so I was delayed. Wuxia Xianxia was very young and humble. Even when facing his subordinate, Guang, he still had a humble expression on his face. This was hard to imagine. Feudal dynasties had a strict hierarchy system. Superiors were always indifferent to their subordinates. Even if they did something wrong, they would not admit it. Of course, the subordinates would not dare to pursue the matter. However, Wuxia Xianxia came late and apologized, which greatly exceeded the expectations of Long Qi and Nong Si. The two of them looked at each other at the same time, as if to say, could the person who came be Governor Wan? How could he apologize to a subordinate general? This didn't make sense. Guang stood there. He was also frightened by Wuxia Xianxia's attitude. Although the other party just said it casually, he still expressed his apology. This suddenly made him very nervous. Governor Wan, please don't say that. You are a superior. We should wait for you. Hey, you can't say that. The sixth young master said that all people are born equal. As long as everyone is willing to work hard, is willing to improve, and has a benevolent heart, then they will be respected. So, I came late and delayed your time. It's just an apology. It's nothing. It's something that should be done. Wuxia Xianxia suddenly became serious, as if he was talking about something very important. Guang also put away the charming smile on his face. Wuxia Xianxia had mentioned the sixth young master, who was a godlike existence in the eyes of some people. Even Guang had only seen Yang Qindong once when he entered the city. At that time, he was so scared that he didn't dare to raise his head. He only knew that the sixth young master was very powerful, very powerful. Now that even Governor Wuxia Xianxia was so serious, he of course had to stop smiling. These words also reached Long Qi and Nong Si's ears, and they couldn't help but tremble. Since Governor Wuxia Xianxia said that all people were equal, didn't it mean that they had a chance? After all, they were also citizens of Laos. After a simple greeting at the door, Guang quickly invited Wuxia Xianxia into the house. This is the first time I'm visiting. I brought some gifts for sister-in-law. General please accept it. Wuxia Xianxia said with a smile as he casually sized up the residence. A Leng phone guard behind him then handed over a very exquisite box. This was the first cosmetics and perfume that were taken out of the imitation warehouse. After continuous development and self-processing in Qiming City, there was a new brand and packaging, Yang's Beautiful Beauty. Yang's Beautiful Beauty cosmetics had now become the best item in the eyes of upper-class women. Not only could it make women whiter and delay aging, there was also a set of 6 bottles of perfume that could make women exude different fragrances. The value of this set alone was more than 2,000 taels, and it belonged to the kind that had a price but no market. If it could be taken further away, even if the price was several times higher, it would still be a hot commodity. Thank you, this general thanks Governor Wan for his kindness. Guang took the gift with a flattered look and carefully put it in the hands of the servant. He spread his right arm and said, Governor Wan, the banquet is ready, please. Let's go together. Wuxia Xianxia still smiled and nodded, and under Guang's lead, step by step, walked towards the banquet hall. Several people walked and chatted, and Long Qi and Nongxi were also introduced to Wuxia Xianxia by Guang. Mr. Long has made a great contribution to the liberation of Lao province. This is something that the world will not forget. Looking at Long Qi, Wuxia Xianxia said seriously. Thank you for Governor Wan's recognition, thank you. Long Qi said with tears running down his face. Since the Lansang kingdom was destroyed and changed to Lao province, who knows how many people scolded him behind his back, saying that he was a traitor, unfilial, and so on. Although Long Qi could shamelessly ignore all of this, he still found that many people alienated from him. There were even people who threatened that a disloyal person like Long Qi would not really believe him. The current Lao province was only because it wanted to stabilize, so it did not bring up the old debts. It would not be long before someone came to find trouble with him. What a joke, the mercenaries gave Long Qi 5 million taels of silver. That was a huge sum. How could he not take it back? It was only a matter of time. Look, Long Qi would not be able to jump around for long. When these words reached Long Qi's ears, he was already trembling with fear. It must be said that he had considered this problem before, and he had the same worries, but what could he do? Leave now? If he really did that, it would only speed up the mercenaries' pace of making a move on him. After thinking about it, Long Qi decided to stay quiet, and he even reduced the chances of him showing up. It was so that people could gradually forget about him. Just like when he partnered with the Solingen family to do business, he would not show up. Instead, he chose to make a fortune in silence. This time, if it wasn't for this problem, he would also not want to have any dealings with the mercenaries. Even if Wuxia Xianxia's power was monstrous, he did not want to see him if he could. Long Qi was not the only one with this idea. In the current Lao province, the mercenaries seemed to have gained a firm foothold, and they had gained the support of many people. However, the ones who truly supported them were the commoners who had benefited from them, as well as the Han people living in Lao province. Because of the arrival of the mercenaries, the commoners had their own fields, jobs to do, and money to earn. Their lives were much better than before. With the thought of not forgetting the person who dug the well when they drank water, they would naturally be grateful and support such a force. There was no need to mention the Han people. Ever since this place became Lao province, their status was extremely stable. Regardless of whether it was in terms of treatment or the degree of respect they received. As Han citizens, they were given more farmland than the other races. Even if they were to work, their income would still be twice that of the other races. As Han citizens, they also enjoyed a high personal status. For example, when they walked on the streets, even the other races' officials would have to take the initiative to stop and let them pass first. This was something that the Han people had never enjoyed before. Furthermore, this was all brought to them by the mercenaries, so how could they not be grateful? However, they were the only ones who truly supported the mercenaries. As for the nobles and tycoons, they would only treat those who gave them more benefits. On the other hand, there was no need to talk about friendship. Only benefits were eternal. Long Qi also had such thoughts. He wanted to borrow the might of the mercenaries, but he did not want to get too close to them. This was the true thinking of people at his level. Right now, Wuxia Xianxia's words of, "Your contributions will not be forgotten by the world," made him feel as though he had found a soulmate. He then thought about how everyone was not optimistic about him, and wanted to isolate him. However, the mercenaries, who used to be his enemy, were actually treating him so highly. Under such a comparison, he could not help but feel like crying. When Wuxia Xianxia saw Long Qi's expression, a smile appeared in his eyes. He knew that the other party was in a difficult situation and needed his help. There was no need for him to be courteous. As if he had just thought of something, he said, "Mr. Long, you were once a grand tutor. I'm sure you have a lot of connections. How about this, if you have the time, you can interact with some of the nobles, and contact some of them to contribute to the development of Lao province. If you need any help, our provincial government is willing to back you up. How about that?" Chapter 603. This was an invitation. Long Qi was stunned at first, but before he could react, He Guang's elbow had already pressed against his waist. Although he didn't speak, the meaning was already very obvious, that is, there is such a good thing, you should quickly agree. Of course, this was a good thing. This meant that Wuxia Xianxia needed Long Qi to unite the hearts of the nobles. This was equivalent to working for the mercenaries. If anyone dared to disrespect Long Qi, it would not only be disrespecting Long Qi, but it would also be disrespecting the Lao's government and the mercenaries. The result would be obvious. In fact, Long Qi was not very old, just over 50 years old. He could still continue to shine. The most important thing was that he used to be the state preceptor here, so he was very familiar with the upper class. The matter of unifying the hearts of the nobles, in the eyes of an outsider like Wuxia Xianxia, may not be easy to do. It would take a lot of time just to investigate and understand some things. But it was not a problem for him. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was easy to do. Thinking that once he could become a representative of the mercenaries, who would dare not to give face to him, Long Chi's heart immediately became lively. At the moment, his old face flushed red and he cupped his fist to Luan Xiaoli. Thank you, Governor Luan. As long as my old bones are still here, I will do my best to do this matter. Huh, good. Luan Xiaochen laughed and reached out to help Long Chi up. This was also an unexpected surprise. With Long Chi as the vanguard, many things will be much smoother. At least, he knew who could be friends and who could be enemies. It was okay to be generous to friends. But to enemies, there was only one word: kill. Kill until they were terrified, kill until they were afraid, and if it still didn't work, then kill until they were all dead. Anyway, the lives of the foreigners were never the first. After greeting Long Chi, Luan Xiaochen's gaze fell on Nong Si again. The Sorengan family is a famous business family. This governor has also heard of it. You are very business-minded and capable. Your business channels are also perfect, which is admirable. I don't dare. Nong Si saw that Long Chi had already leaned over, and his face was already full of envy. But he knew that such a good thing had nothing to do with him. Not for anything else, just because they were businessmen. Businessmen could not be too political. Otherwise, if they wanted to do business in other countries to make money, they would be ostracized. That would be a great loss. Luan Xiaochen did not have the intention to rope him in. The development of Laos could not be done without businessmen. But that didn't mean that he couldn't live without a single merchant. Could it be that he, Butcher Zhang, would be able to eat a pig with hair if he left? As they spoke, they arrived at the banquet hall. Luan Xiaochen naturally sat at the head of the table. He Guang sat on the left, Long Chi sat on the right, and Nong Si sat on the opposite side. Wine and dishes were served, followed by a toast. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, everyone was almost done eating. Next, it was time to get down to business. Nong Si gave full play to his potential as a businessman. He told the story of Sorengan clan's encounter on the Mekong River as if it was a story. He didn't add anything, nor did he add any personal opinions. He knew that such a big event couldn't be exaggerated at all. Otherwise, it would easily backfire. Luan Xiaochen listened very carefully. Even when Nong Si finished talking, he did not express his opinion at the first moment. On the other hand, He Guang, who was sitting on the left, reprimanded General Hun Sen's behavior. It seemed that he did it deliberately. After all, he was now a mercenary. Of course, he had to stand on the right side. Hun Sen. What's his background and identity? Luan Xiaochen wanted to know more about the situation, so he looked at the 3 people. Let me answer that, Long Chi said. He had always wanted to perform well. As a former state preceptor, he was very familiar with the situation of the surrounding countries. It was not an exaggeration to say that he knew everything. From Long Chi, Luan Xiaochen learned more about Han. Senator Hun Sen was one of the important military representatives of the Golden Bien dynasty. His position in the army was second only to General De. Although they were both generals, Hun Sen and De were quite different. General De would treat his soldiers with sincerity. Unless it was necessary, he would not be too cruel to his soldiers. If possible, he would try his best to give his soldiers some opportunities to improve themselves. Hun Sen was different. This person was ruthless and extremely greedy. He even dared to embezzle the pay of his soldiers, which caused many people to be dissatisfied with him. However, this person was very good to those who were stronger than him. He would give gifts during festivals, which made him a good impression in the eyes of the higher-ups of the Golden Bien Kingdom. Even King Boromir had a good impression of him. It could be said that he was a typical example of flattering the superior and bullying the inferior. There were too many people who had received benefits from him, so it was difficult to touch him. After Long Chi introduced the situation one by one, he finally added some of his own thoughts. As far as this old man knows, although this person is ruthless, he is still very discerning when doing things. He is very clear about who can be offended and who can't be offended. This time, he suddenly attacked the Sorangan family, which is different from his usual behavior. It is really unreasonable. What Long Qi meant was that the Sorangan family was a part of Lao province and had a good relationship with Daoist and the Golden Bian Kingdom. Logically speaking, Hun Sen should not have any thoughts of attacking them. Could it be that he was blinded by greed and dared to rob money for money? Long Qi could not be blamed for having such thoughts. This matter was not done by Hun's senator, it was done by Yunk with Yang Chendong's consent. The reason why Hun Sen was chosen was that this person was very greedy and was very famous. If he was not the scapegoat, who else could it be? Of course, Wan Shaochen would not delve into the reason. He only knew that the citizens and merchants of Lao province had been persecuted. As the governor of the province, he had to seek justice. Otherwise, an official who only knew how to be unruly in his own home would not be respected. After seriously understanding the matter, Wan Shaochen's eyes fell on Nong Si, wanting to hear his opinion. Nong Si knew that it was time for him to express his opinion, so he told Long Qi his plan. Governor Wan, I have arranged for someone to go to the Golden Bian Kingdom and ask Hun Sen to return the stolen money. I also sent someone to plead with General Dun, hoping that he can put some pressure on Hun Sr., that's it? Wan Shaochen looked at Nong Si for a long time and realized that Nong Si had finished speaking. He looked at him with some dissatisfaction. Yes, that's it. Nong Si nodded with a puzzled face. He thought to himself, isn't it enough? It's already good enough to recover the lost money. As for the people who were killed, they can only blame themselves for their bad luck. That's not enough. Wan Shaochen shook his head decisively, then looked at Nong Si and said, Patriarch, since you have come to me, it means that you have found the Lao provincial government. If this matter is so simple, it is tantamount to blasphemy against the provincial government. Do you understand? Nong Si just wanted to recover the lost money and reopen the trade with the Golden Bian Kingdom. He didn't think so much. Looking at Nong Si's shocked face, Wan Shaochen shook his head. Businessmen are businessmen, after all. They only see the benefits in their eyes. How can they see the big picture? It seems that I need to remind him. Patriarch, now I'm giving you two choices. First, pretend that you didn't report this matter to the provincial government, and we didn't receive your request. You can deal with it yourself. Whether you suffer a loss or gain, it's your family's business. Second, report this matter to the provincial government and ask them to hand over the murderer, compensate for the loss, and make a public apology, and guarantee that this kind of thing won't happen again. As for whether they will agree or not, we will communicate with them. If they are really arrogant and don't put the citizens and businessmen of Lao in their eyes, then we will have to teach them a lesson. Teach them a lesson? He Guang heard it clearly. Governor Wan, do you mean to send troops? I don't rule out that possibility. Wan Shaochen didn't hesitate and said directly. Hiss. Whether it was He Guang, Long Qi, or Nong Si, when they heard that Wan Shaochen didn't rule out the possibility of sending troops, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. It's just losing some money and some people. These losses are the Sorangan family's own business. They didn't pay more taxes to the Lao government, but because of this, Wan Shaochen didn't hesitate to send troops. This result is really unexpected, and they didn't even think about it before. At this moment, the way the three looked at Wan Shaochen changed. Although this person is still young, he seems to be covered with a layer of halo that makes people look up to him. Okay, Patriarch, you can make a choice. What I can say is that no matter what choice you make, I will respect you. But please remember, if you don't want to make a big deal out of this, then all the consequences of this matter will be borne by your family. If you encounter unfair things in the future, don't think that we will stand up for you. In other words, there is only one chance, understand? Of course, Wan Shaochen had his own reasons for saying this. Lao had just been established, and there were too many things to be done. It was not the right time to start a war. It would be best if they could avoid it. However, if the Sorangan family were to request the government, it would be a different story. If they were to ignore the request, it would be a disheartening blow to the hearts of the people, which would be detrimental to the establishment of a united Lao province. Chapter 604. For the sake of the people, for a better and more united Laos, even if the time was not right, he dared to fight. Because he believed in the sixth young master and the mercenary army. As for giving Nong Si only one chance to choose, it was because a government could not be controlled by businessmen. Today you want to do this, tomorrow you want to do something else. Do you think the government is run by you alone? Now, he had to make a decision to stop this kind of thing from happening again. Wuxia Xianxia stated the conditions, and it was Nong Si's turn to think about it. This was a serious matter, and it might even involve the mercenary army. He had to be careful. Wuxia Xianxia did not intend to urge him. Instead, he chatted with Yiguang and Long Qi about the rich families in Laos. The casual conversation also allowed him to know more about the country, especially about some of the hidden nobles. He got first-hand information about what kind of people they were and what they liked. As for Nong Si, his forehead was covered with layers of cold sweat. He really couldn't make this decision. He wanted to ask if he could go back and think about it, but he thought about Wuxia Xianxia's identity. This time, he took the initiative to ask for help. How could he be given time to think about it? However, if he really sent the army for a few 100,000 taels of silver, it would be a bit of a joke. But if he did not ask Wuxia Xianxia, would Hun Sen let him go? He had already robbed him once, and he had already offended him. He was afraid that there would not be a second time. Increase the protection of the caravan? What a joke. That was Hun Sen's territory. Even if he hired more people, how could he be a match for Hun Sen? Not to mention that hiring one more person would cost more money, which was not in line with the rules of businessmen to save money. In other words, if he did not ask for help from the Laos government, he was afraid that the Sorangans would not be able to trade with the Phnom Penh dynasty in the future. Not only would he lose a big customer, but he might also cause Wuxia Xianxia's dissatisfaction. What? You came to ask me for help, but after I gave you an idea, you became timid. What do you think the Laos government is? On the other hand, if things got out of hand, the business of the Golden Rim dynasty might really be abandoned. But it wasn't that there weren't any benefits. On the contrary, there would be great benefits. After this incident, the Solangan family would become famous. In the future, wherever their caravan went, who would dare to provoke them? Wouldn't they be afraid of the mercenary army? In the long run, enduring the pain for a while seemed to be a good thing. After all, he, Nong Si, was still young and had some guts. In addition, if he couldn't solve this problem, he would have to give up the position of patriarch. This was something he was unwilling to accept. After thinking about it, there seemed to be only one choice left. How is it? Has the clan leader made his decision? Wuxia Xianxia could wait, but he couldn't wait endlessly. There were so many things for him to deal with. Every minute was precious to him. Knowing that he had to make a decision, Nong Si's eyes flashed with determination. Okay, I'll listen to Governor Luan's orders. Yiguang and Long Qi weren't surprised that Nong Si would be so tactful. If he hadn't made such a choice, they would have been suspicious and cut off all ties with him. After all, in a place like Lao province, disobeying Wuxia Xianxia wouldn't lead to anything good. Okay. Wuxia Xianxia patted the table to show that he was a little excited. That's it. Don't stop what the Solangan family has been doing. Once the Golden Rim dynasty gives a result that is not satisfactory, you report it to Yang Pao. After everyone knows about it through the World Knowledge Tea House, it's time for our government to step in. Wuxia Xianxia didn't intend to directly put pressure on the Golden Rim dynasty. He even used the excuse of sending troops. At this stage, the main focus of the provincial government was still on economic development. If he really did this, it was inevitable that he would encounter some opposition. Although with his identity and relationship with Yang Qindong, he could make his words carry weight. After all, they were all working together. It was better not to fall out with him if it was possible. If this matter was reported to Yang Bao and the whole world knew about it, then even if it was for the sake of dignity and face, they could only fight. Only the people and the government would not say anything else. Only when the people's hearts were united could they do great things. Wuxia Xianxia made a plan according to his thoughts. After an hour, he left He Mansion in a low-key manner. Unless he had arranged a spy here before, otherwise, he would not know that Governor Luan had visited his mansion at night. When Yang Chendong received the information from the Security Bureau that Wuxia Xianxia had visited He Mansion at night and met with Long Qi and Nong Si secretly, the corners of his mouth curled up. No, Governor Luan knows when to advance and when to retreat. It's good that he knows to keep a low profile before things are settled. But if that's the case, I think we have to speed up our actions. Looking at the vast dense forest in front of him, he issued a military order: speed up the march and gather at the designated place. The capital of the Golden Rim Dynasty was Golden Rim City. The people sent by the Solingans finally arrived. They found General Dagan and asked him to put pressure on the Golden Rim Dynasty. At the same time, they found General Hun Sen to express their dissatisfaction and their intention to ask for the silver back. Hun Sen was naturally confused. Why did he have to give the silver back to them? Moreover, it was more than 100,000 taels. Did they think he was easy to bully? They could find any reason to bully him. The other party was just a businessman from Laos. He couldn't represent the Laos government, let alone the mercenaries. Why should he be afraid of such a person? As a result, he was kicked out before he could even see General Hun Sen's face. The soldiers also threatened that if he dared to make trouble again, it wouldn't be as simple as kicking him out next time. At least a part of his body would be left behind. The people from the Solingans who found General Dagan didn't have a good ending. General Dagan had only received some benefits from them. Why would he fall out with another general with real power for such a small benefit? Choosing the lesser of two evils, Dagan's approach wasn't wrong. But what he did was equivalent to cutting off all hope for the Solingans. The people who were sent out returned to Wanxiang City and reported the result to the Patriarch, Nong Si. If it was before, Nong Si would have been heartbroken and helpless when he heard the result. But now, he knew that Governor Luan would take action. He naturally had confidence in his heart. He immediately ordered people to find the arranged reporters, and let them report to Yang Pao about the tragedy of the Solingans caravan in Shangding City of the Golden Rim Dynasty. It was also known as the Mekong River Tragedy. The next day, the Yang family published the Mekong River Tragedy in the newspaper. The news spread through the World Knowledge Tea House and soon caused a great sensation. The injustice suffered by the Solingans in the Golden Rim Dynasty had been spread throughout the upper class of Laos. This was naturally because of Long Qi. During this period of time, under the banner of Wuxia Xianxia, he secretly met with many nobles of the Lansang kingdom. While deepening his friendship with them, he also reached a lot of consensus. This was not only because Long Qi, as the state preceptor, was good at talking with people. There was also a more important reason. All the nobles knew that there was no hope of reviving the country. Even their king, Piacy, was said to have been sent to the sea and put under house arrest. Without a leader, they were like a pile of loose sand. It was too difficult for them to make any progress. They were defeated one by Long Qi using various means. It was one thing for Long Qi to say it, but it was another thing for it to be published in Yang Pao. This would make it known to everyone. It was even tantamount to forcing the government to make a statement. Could it be that the young Governor Luan was ready to put pressure on the Golden Rim Dynasty and was even prepared to go to war? When the nobles were still guessing how much trouble this matter would cause, the news spread to the people and really caused a lot of anger. Many people were very unhappy with the behavior of the Golden Rim Dynasty. With the help of some people, there were already many people who thought that the Golden Rim Dynasty should give an explanation for this matter. If they still did not bow down, then they would not hesitate to go to war. For this reason, many young people said that once the war started, they were willing to sign up for the army and do their best to protect the dignity of Laos. There was a motive, a reason, and even a momentum was created. On the third day, Wuxia Xianxia, who had been secretly paying attention to this matter, finally expressed his opinion at a meeting of the provincial government. He had every reason to suspect that the injustice suffered by the Sorangan family was caused by the Phnom Penh dynasty. Their ultimate target was Laos, which was still under construction and development. As the governor of Laos, he said that he liked peace and loved peace. However, if anyone dared to trample on the dignity of Laos, then he would not hesitate to go to war. Even if he had to pay the price, he would seek justice and an explanation. He even reserved the right to send troops to seek justice. Yuan Xiaoqian's words naturally caught the staff of the provincial government off guard. This was an economic development meeting. How could they talk about war? Wasn't this off-topic? However, anyone who had seen Yang Pao in the past 3 days knew that Governor Yuan was also forced. After all, the people under his rule had been treated unfairly. If they did not make a statement and did not give an explanation, then who would believe them? As a result, although Yuan Xiaoqian suddenly made a statement, there was no one who stood up to stop him at the meeting. This was because not only did they doubt Yuan Xiaoqian's ability, but also the vast majority of the people of Laos. In the face of such a powerful force, who would stand up to stop him? Chapter 605. The meeting went on smoothly. After that, Yuan Xiaoqian sent a messenger to the Phnom Penh dynasty to demand an explanation. The speed of the response fully reflected the high efficiency of the government. For this reason, Yang Bao also specially added an explanation, and this news also made many people rejoice. From this matter, they also saw that they had a powerful backer behind them. If they could win this war, or force the Phnom Penh dynasty to bow their heads, no matter where they went in the future, they would be able to hold their heads high and not be afraid of being targeted. The messenger was very fast. He left the city at noon and rushed all the way. After 7 days, he arrived in Phnom Penh city. He took out a document and said that he wanted to see the king of the Phnom Penh dynasty. The officials of the Ministry of Rights were responsible for receiving the messenger from Laos. When they learned the purpose of the messenger, these officials were shocked. They were shocked that a caravan was killed. How could the Laos government be so agitated? Could it be that one of the people who was killed was a high-ranking official in the provincial government? Faced with the firm attitude of the messenger, the receptionist did not dare to be careless. He quickly reported the matter. In the end, the document asking for compensation and an apology was sent to King Boromir's desk. When Boromir saw this document, he felt a sense of confusion. But then, he was furious. He immediately ordered someone to find General Hun's senator. He wanted to ask if the matter was true. If it was true, General Hun Sen was too bold. Due to the mercenary army's strength and combat power, it took half a year to conquer Jiaoji and Lansang respectively, forcing the surrounding countries to take the initiative to form an alliance. For example, the Phnom Penh dynasty was now an ally of Siam and the Awol dynasty. Although they were allies, it did not mean that they were willing to compete with the mercenary army. At least, none of the 3 countries were willing to take the initiative to provoke the mercenary army and become their first target. Perhaps in the final battle, the 3 countries would win, but the first country to be defeated would definitely be the most miserable. Even if they won, they would not get any benefits. Therefore, the 3 countries put their hopes on other countries. They hoped that other countries would fight with the mercenary army to the death first, so that they could reap the benefits. However, this definitely didn't mean that his country would be the first country to fight to the death with the mercenaries. Hun Sen was urgently called to the palace. As soon as he saw Hun Sen, he was scolded by the king. Hun Sen didn't know what he had done recently to incur the king's anger. When Bo Guoma was tired of scolding, he threw the document at Hun Sen's feet. He looked at Hun Sen with an expression that said, "Look at what you've done." Hun Sen picked up the document with trepidation. When he saw what was written on it, he immediately regained his confidence. He was greedy for money, and had done many things that crossed the line, but the Solangan family's caravan was definitely not under his command. So at this moment, he strongly refuted, and even cursed to prove his innocence. Hun Sen raised his head and looked as though he had been greatly wronged. When Boromir saw this, he started to doubt the authenticity of this matter. After all, there was no reason for Hun Sen to lie in front of him. If he did, he would find a way to make up for it. You really didn't do this? Although Boromir was 70% convinced, he couldn't help but ask with certainty. Absolutely not. If I did, I'm willing to be burned to ashes after my death, Hun Sen said fiercely. Of course, he was full of confidence. Ever since the Solingans sent people over, he had deliberately called a few of his confidants over. In the end, he confirmed that these people didn't do anything. Everything was a misunderstanding. Now that someone was using this matter as an excuse, of course he wasn't afraid. If you didn't do it, why did the Solingans insist that you did it? They even sent a document from Laos because of this. Could it be that they are deliberately putting the blame on us so that they can use the army against us? Boromir's eyes kept darting around as he considered all kinds of possibilities. That must be it. They want to use the army against us. Your Majesty, the mercenaries are very ambitious. This is the reason they are looking for. We have to be careful, Hun Sen immediately agreed after hearing what Boromir said. Ah. So that's the case. How can they bully us like this? Why are they looking for us? What should we do? Why don't General Hun? Boromir was halfway through his sentence when he shook his head. Now that he had formed an alliance with Siam and the Awad dynasty, if he showed any intention of backing out, it would mean that he had voluntarily withdrawn from the alliance. If that happened, if the mercenaries really chose him as their next target, without an ally, how could he resist them? It seemed that it was impossible to back down. However, if he insisted on being stubborn, he didn't want to be attacked by the mercenaries. He couldn't make a decision at the moment. He looked at Hun Sen, who was still waiting for his orders, and waved his hand. You can leave now. By the way, when people ask you about this matter, don't say anything. Don't admit or deny it. Let's see how it goes. Oh, Hun Sen responded intentionally. It seemed that this matter had something to do with him. However, since the king had such an attitude, what else could he do other than agree? Before Boromir could come up with a solution, he kept delaying the matter. When the messenger from Laos failed to meet him 3 times, he left angrily. Before he left, he even said in a domineering tone that if he still couldn't get a satisfactory answer when he returned to Laos, he would send an army instead of an emissary to Laos. The messenger left. Based on what he said before he left, there wasn't much time left for the Phnom Penh dynasty. There were only 7 days left. If they couldn't make a decision, it seemed like a war was imminent. When he heard that a war was about to break out, Boromir was really afraid. The military strength of the Phnom Penh dynasty was only average. In terms of territory, it was smaller than Laos. Once a fight broke out, what would he use to defend against the mercenary army? He couldn't win the war. If he couldn't win, he would have to bow down. If he bowed down, the mercenaries would have no reason to send an army. Although it would be humiliating and might even cause dissatisfaction with his allies, what other choice did he have? Just when Boromir was hesitating, and he was even inclined to admit defeat, the messengers from Siam and the Awad dynasty suddenly appeared. They all expressed their approval of the Phnom Penh dynasty's initiative to attack Laos. At the same time, they also stated that if Laos wanted to harm the Phnom Penh dynasty, they wouldn't sit idly by. They would take the initiative to send troops to help. After all, they were allies. With the support of his allies, Boromir's confidence increased a little. However, he still couldn't make a decision. But it was at this moment that something unexpected happened. He didn't know how, but this matter was spread all over the country. Immediately, a large number of citizens stood up and expressed that they would not lower their heads for the sake of the country's dignity. At this critical moment, they were willing to fight for the country. Following the pleas of the people, more and more nobles and rich gentry stood up. They expressed that they would not bow down to the unreasonable accusations of Lao province. For this reason, they were willing to pay a large amount of military expenditure to support the king. The people's matter was easy to deal with. As long as the public opinion was good, the kind and ignorant people could be easily manipulated and led. But why did the nobles stand up as well? Boromir was very puzzled. He immediately sent someone to investigate. Soon, the results reached his ears. It turned out that the nobles did this for the sake of their own interests. They said that it was for the sake of their interests because the envoys of Siam and Ava contacted them in private. They said that as long as Laos was defeated and occupied, the nobles would get a lot of benefits. They had no choice because there were too many precedents. Whether it was in Vietnam or Laos, many of the nobles' fields had been divided and their houses occupied. Once the mercenaries occupied Phnom Penh dynasty, the nobles would be forced to a dead end. This was indeed the case. In the spirit of giving land to the rich was the fastest way to get closer to the people and gain their support. This was done in both Vietnam and Laos. Many rich gentry went bankrupt because of this, and some of them even had their properties confiscated because of this, and their entire family was taken away to reform through labor. However, not all nobles were targeted like this. For example, some nobles who were doing legitimate business or inherited their titles and relied on their salaries. Because they didn't have a lot of land and didn't do anything evil, they still maintained their strength intact. But no one knew that if these people were not targeted now, they would not be targeted in the future. What if the mercenaries were to gain a foothold? Would they do something to them? No one could say for sure. This scared the nobles of Phnom Penh dynasty. In addition, some people instigated them, so they all stood up. Instead of being at the mercy of others, they might as well fight. What if they defeated the mercenaries? Then, not only would they be fine, but there would also be a lot of benefits to be gained. It was clear that everyone knew what they should do in this situation. As a result, these people jumped out and decided to take a gamble. If it was only the support of the people, Boromir was not worried. He was the ruler here. As long as he gave the order, with the help of the army, it would be easy to suppress some people. However, with the participation of these nobles, it was completely different. These people's forces were complicated. If things went wrong, even his throne would be in danger. These people were not to be offended. In other words, his rise to the throne was inseparable from the support of these people. Chapter 606. With the support of the people, the support of the allies of the two countries, and the pressure of the nobles, Boromir had no other choice. He made up his mind to not lower his head, and began to mobilize the army. While asking for military funds from the nobles, he also began to recruit soldiers from the people. There was no such thing as an airtight secret, not to mention that the Golden Bien dynasty had no intention of hiding their actions. Just as the emissary returned to Wansheng City, new news came. The Golden Bien dynasty had begun to prepare for war, and had recruited 100,000 soldiers from the people. In addition to his original army, the number of soldiers reached 400,000. When the number of enemies was reported to Yuan Shaochen, he was shocked. His first reaction was to ask his subordinate, the sixth young master, where was he? When he found out that the sixth young master had returned to Wansheng City and was in the original Lansang Palace, Yuan Shaochen put down everything in his hands and rushed to the palace. Now that things had gotten out of hand, he could not hold it in anymore. He urgently needed the support of the sixth young master. Yang Chendong returned to Wansheng City the night before yesterday. As the saying goes, leaving the city without a sound, returning without a sound. He returned after arranging everything. After being busy for a while, he came back and had a good sleep. When he woke up, Yang Chendong began to stroll around the palace. As he walked around, he clicked his tongue and sighed, "These bastards really know how to enjoy life. The country isn't very big, and there are still many people who can't afford to eat. Their palaces are bigger and more luxurious than the other. How many people's hard-earned money is this? Young master, the palace in Crimson City is better than here." Hearing Yang Chendong sigh, Tiger's Mane thought that the sixth young master was mentally unbalanced, and wanted to comfort him. "I know." Yang Chendong nodded, then looked at Tiger's Mane as if he was looking at an idiot. This immediately attracted Beta Persei's laughter from the other side. Knowing that he was being laughed at by Beta Persei and seen as an idiot by the sixth young master, Tiger's Mane was a little unconvinced. He wanted to explain, but Yang Chendong spoke first. The young master thought that it would be a waste to have such a big palace here. Why don't we make good use of it? Why is there no one living here? The young master can live here. In the future, he will have a palace in every province he goes to. How great would that be? Tiger's mane seemed to be dissatisfied with the contempt and took the initiative to speak. What? In your eyes, the young master is a person who likes to be extravagant and wasteful? After rolling his eyes again, Yang Chendong did not give Tiger's mane a chance to speak. Instead, he said as if he had made some kind of decision, I think we can move the business street to the palace. This way, not only will the business area be bigger, but doing business in the palace will also attract more curious people. That way, we can earn more money, right? If they really did business in the palace, they could really attract more merchants. Think about it, because of the difference in levels, although merchants were rich, their social status was not high. Most of them did not have the opportunity to enter the palace. If there really was such an opportunity, there would definitely be merchants who had not established business relations with the Yang family who would want to take a look. As long as they came, with the variety of products and novelty of the Yang family's business, there was no need to worry that those people would not take out money to buy the goods. Wouldn't that increase the speed of earning money? In terms of earning money, the trading company of the outer skies was not inferior to the fighting strength of the mercenaries. Especially the novelty of the products and the variety of products. No matter where they were, these products would be crazily fought over. However, Yang Chendong was still not satisfied. There were too many things that needed to be spent on the Yangxia. For example, high salaries. Currently, the officials of Vietnam and Laos were receiving high salaries, which were even higher than the tax revenue of these two provinces. If they wanted to reach the same level, they would need to develop for a period of time. And if they wanted to achieve the goal of earning money, they would have to wait for a few more years. In addition, the basic construction of the two provinces, such as building roads and houses, used reinforced concrete, which was the toughest and most useful material. The investment required was astronomical. This was Yang Chendong. If it was someone else, they would only be able to dream about it and would not be able to use it in reality. Although the development of Crimson City was going well and it already had a strong ability to earn money, every time a ship was shipped, it was equivalent to countless gold and silver being thrown into one's pocket. However, just relying on the ability to produce blood here was not good for long-term development. Moreover, the military factories, power plants, shipyards, and so on were also extremely costly. Sometimes, in order to succeed in a research project, one would have to fork out an unimaginable amount of money. Yang Chendong did not want to place all the pressure on Crimson City. He wanted the businesses in Vietnam and Laos to become more developed and larger. Only then would they be able to produce enough hematopoietic products and sell their own products. However, the scale of the business street was still too small. The number of merchants it could receive was limited, and the amount of goods it could store was also limited. Therefore, he set his sights on the uninhabited palace. Governor Luan is here. Beta Persei's sharp eyes had already seen Wuxia Xianxia approaching from afar and reminded him in a low voice. Little Governor Luan is here. Yang Chendong returned to reality from his contemplation and turned around to laugh. The title of Little Governor Luan was first called by Yang Chendong, so Tiger's mane and the others often called him that in private. Because of habit, sometimes when they met in person, they would still call him that. This caused Wuxia Xianxia to be dissatisfied, but he could not say anything. After all, this was Yang Chendong's love for him. Adding the word little in front of the governor's name, would it really not affect his prestige? The sixth young master. Although he was displeased with the word little in his heart, he did not dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction in front of Yang Chendong. He even knew in his heart that adding the word little meant that Yang Chendong treated him as one of his own. If you don't believe me, go and look at the others. Who else had the word little in front of their official title? He should be happy that he was the only one who received this honor. Come, you came at the right time. Yang Chendong stretched out his hand and pulled Wuxia Xianxia's arm, then pointed to the palace in front of him and said, "What do you think about making this place into a place where business is concentrated?" Here. Luan Xiaochen was also shocked by Yang Chendong's words. He instinctively wanted to say the same thing as Tiger's Mane. This was the place where the sixth young master came to rest. It was equivalent to the emperor's side palace. Was he really willing to use it for business? Yes, it's here. Yang Chendong did not care what Luan Xiaochen thought. Instead, he said to himself, usually, no one lives here. Instead, we have to arrange for people to guard and clean here. It's simply too wasteful. If he could take it out and make good use of it, wouldn't he be able to use it to attract more merchants to come here? Don't you think this is a good idea? Of course, it's a good idea. Luan Xiaochen said with certainty in his heart. As the situation in Laos became more and more stable, more and more businessmen came to get goods. He was worried that the original business street was a little too small. But if he wanted to expand, he would need to invest a lot of money, which made him a little distressed. If the palace could be used, not only would it solve the problem of investment, it could also expand the commercial street, store more goods, satisfy the needs of more people, earn more money, and get more business tax. No matter how one looked at it, it was a good thing. Although he thought so in his heart, Luan Xiaochen still asked a question: if this place is changed into a business district, where will the sixth young master live here in the future? Just leave a side palace. The area of this palace is too large. I can't live alone. Yang Chendong answered casually. Obviously, he had just thought about this problem and made a decision. That's also possible. Luan Xiaochen nodded. He could only say that it was possible. He could not say that it would definitely work or not. This was where he was smart. The palace was equivalent to Yang Chendong's private property. He could decide how to deal with it. Other people did not have such power, even if he might be Yang Chendong's brother-in-law in the future. Otherwise, if other people knew that he was the one who wanted to use the palace, and then the sixth young master agreed, who knew if it would cause some bootlickers to be unhappy? It was even possible to cause a group of people to attack him because of this. As the territory controlled by Yang Chendong grew larger and larger, and as the strength of the mercenaries continued to expand, no one thought that the sixth young master would be limited to being a loyal duke. Not to mention a duke, it was very normal for him to be called a king and an emperor in the future. Anything related to the sixth young master was not a trivial matter, and there would be more and more rules in the future. Now that he wanted to use his private property, it was inevitable that he would be punished in the future. Luan Xiaochen was very careful, and it could even be said that he had a long-term vision. In the eyes of Yang Chendong, he just laughed. He liked subordinates who did things with a sense of propriety. Such people could be entrusted with important tasks and have greater prospects in the future. Well, since you don't object, it's settled. In the future, not only the royal palace here, but also the royal palace in Yunnan province, as long as the other occupied royal palaces can be classified as commercial use. In this way, we can save some time and financial resources to build a commercial street, ha ha ha. Yang Chendong was happy with his idea. At the same time, the words, "you don't object," also removed Luan Xiaochen from this matter. If you don't object, it was enough to show that this matter was led by Yang Chendong alone, and it had nothing to do with other people. If there were any problems in the future, naturally, they would not be able to find other people. Yang Chendong's words revealed another piece of information, and that was that he would occupy other palaces in the future. This also shocked Luan Xiaochen, and he took the opportunity to tell the person in charge of Yang Chendong. The sixth young master, there are some problems now, and it started with a business family called Solingen. Chapter 607. Luan Xiaochen didn't know that Yang Chendong had already known about the development of this matter from the beginning to the end, and it was even planned by Yang Chendong. He was just fulfilling his duty as a governor and reported the matter truthfully. Yang Chendong did not intend to interrupt Luan Xiaochen. Instead, he listened to the report very carefully. From time to time, he would frown and nod. After a while, when Yuan Shaochen finally finished, especially when Yuan Shaochen mentioned that the Golden Bian dynasty had begun to gather troops and recruit new troops, Yang Chendong could not help but say, "They are just courting death." He did have such qualifications to say such things. In the eyes of others, the Golden Border dynasty was a great existence. Even in the eyes of the great Ming dynasty, because it was too far away, it was quite out of reach. However, in Yang Chendong's view, it was completely different. The Golden Border dynasty bordered Vietnam, Laos, and Siam respectively. Just like the filling of a bun, it was tightly surrounded by the dough. If it was really aimed at him, Yang Chendong could start from several places. How could he put such a Golden Border dynasty in his eyes? Yuan Shaochen was also excited by Yang Chendong's words. Yes, the Golden Border dynasty's move is no different from looking for death, but the problem is that now the three small countries of Phnom Penh, Siam, and Ava have formed an alliance. No matter which of them is attacked, the other two countries will immediately follow. Although the mercenary is strong, it is still difficult to fight against three. You're right. But let me ask you, is the Sorangan family a citizen of Laos? Yang Chendong asked. Of course. In this regard, Yuan Shaochen gave the answer without hesitation. Well, if they are citizens of Laos, then they are bullied. As the masters, how can we just sit back and do nothing? This will not only lose the hearts of the people, but it will also make others think that we are easy to bully. This must never happen. So if anyone provokes us, there is only one word: beat them. Beat them until they feel pain, beat them until they are afraid, beat them until they are obedient in the future. If we don't even have this bit of courage, then what's the difference between us and other small countries? Remember, the strength of a country doesn't depend on how much territory you have or how much resources you have. It depends on whether your citizens have their own status and whether they can gain the respect of others. Do you understand? This was equivalent to Yang Chendong giving Yuan Shaochen a lesson. The latter listened attentively, and in the end, his eyes lit up. Sixth young master, I understand. Well, if you understand, then do what you should do. Let me, the young master, finish the war in the Golden Bian dynasty. Yang Chendong said confidently. To others, this war was a little sudden, but to him, he had been preparing for it for 4 months, and everything that needed to be arranged had been arranged. Yuan Shaochen left with a happy face. Since the sixth young master said that he would be in charge of the war, he only needed to do the logistics work well. Of course, the economic development of Laos could not be stopped. On the contrary, the huge Lansang Palace could be used, and he could use more goods to launch a larger economic trade. After Yuan Shaochen returned to the provincial government, he did not mention anything about the war. Instead, he announced the decision to move the commercial street to the palace and increase the economic trade development. As soon as the news came out, everyone who heard it was shocked and confused. What happened? Could it be that the mercenaries were afraid of the Golden Bian dynasty? Then they wanted to use the increased economic trade share to attract everyone's attention. It made sense. Although the mercenaries had the most advanced firearms, their foundation was too weak. Plus, they had just conquered Vietnam and Laos, so they should be weak. Even in the face of the Golden Bian dynasty's provocation, they had to suppress it first. When the Patriarch of Solingen heard the news, he immediately panicked. What did this mean? Did Governor Luan shrink back? He had created enough public opinion, and now many business families were waiting to see the result. If things were to end like this, it would be very awkward for the party involved. Not only would the family's business reach be unable to reach the Golden Bian dynasty, but the other countries would also vigorously attack them. After all, this matter seemed to be caused by them first. It was just a business family. If they suffered a loss in a foreign country, they could just admit it, and then use more money and more sincerity to build relationships. But they still wanted to kidnap the mercenaries and the Laos government, and use administrative pressure to solve everything. If they succeeded, others would look up to them, and it would be normal for them to give the green light. But now the Laos government did not care about them. Without their backing, the Solingen family would naturally be hated by everyone. Noam Si's face was full of panic. This was not only because he could no longer be the patriarch, but also because the entire Solingen family was about to collapse under the heavy pressure. If that really happened, he would become the sinner of the family, and be engraved on the list of shame forever. Noam Si could not sit still and wait for death. He got on the carriage and went straight to the Long residence. He wanted to ask Long Xian about it. In fact, with his status, he could not get in touch with any of the higher-ups in Laos. The only person he could get in touch with was his family's business partner. Long Qi was also shocked by the sudden news from the provincial government. Previously, Wuxia Xianxia had solemnly vowed that as long as they exposed the matter and made it known to everyone, the provincial government would not sit by and do nothing. But now, the wind had suddenly changed. What was going on? What happened in the middle of it all? By the time Noam Si arrived at the Long residence, Long Qi had already sent someone to the He residence. He wanted to see if he could meet with General He Guang. If he could see General He Guang, it meant that things were not too bad. Otherwise, things would be troublesome. Recently, he had been using the provincial government's name to contact the nobles in Laos, and he had seen some results. But if he were to be abandoned this time, then all his previous efforts would be for naught. Long Qi himself would also become the object of everyone's disdain. He was afraid that in the future, other than staying obediently in the mansion, he would not be able to do anything else, and no one would be willing to believe in him. Don't worry, don't worry. Long Qi saw Noam Si in front of him, sweating profusely. He comforted him, and at the same time, he was comforting himself. I think Governor Wan is a responsible person. He won't abandon us like this. But he's still too young. Young people are always impulsive. Noam Si said in disbelief. I've already sent someone to see General He Guang. Let's see if he's willing to see us first. Long Qi was also affected by this sentence, but at this moment, he could only hold on to a glimmer of hope and hope that good news would come. After what seemed like 2 hours, it felt like a year had passed. Finally, the person he sent out came back with a message from He Guang. Don't panic. Everything is under control. Just wait and see the results. This was the message from He Guang. Although Long Qi could not understand it, when he learned that the person he sent not only entered the He residence, but also met with General He Guang, he felt relieved. Since He Guang was willing to see his people, it meant that things were not that bad, and there was still hope. No matter how Long Qi comforted himself, many people had already begun to laugh at him. Suddenly, the pressure increased. Whether it was Long Qi or the Solingen family, they were now in a deep crisis. The envoys who had been keeping an eye on the Lao government, especially the governor, Wuxia Xianxia, were secretly celebrating. In view of Wuxia Xianxia's strong statement, they were all ready to fight with the mercenaries. But who would have thought that it was all bark and no bite? It seemed that things were not going to end well. This inevitably made some people sigh that the mercenaries were just so-so. After 5 days, the influence became worse and worse. The nobles who stayed in Lao province also began to increase their communication. From time to time, they would spread rumors that they were not optimistic about the future of Lao province. These nobles no longer had any power, but over the years, they had spread their influence and influence deep into various industries. These nobles were not very good at accomplishing things, but they were very good at causing trouble. Under their influence, the volume of goods sold in the commercial street was greatly affected. The problem that the merchants had to consider now was the safety of the goods that had entered the Yang family's hands after leaving Laos. Although no one could deny that the Yang family's products were unique and of high quality, and they didn't have to worry about not being able to sell their products, what if they were robbed like the Suolangan family? The matter with the Sorangan family was too big. If it was not properly solved, the safety of all the merchants would not be guaranteed. The Phnom Penh dynasty was fine after they robbed the silver. Would the other small countries and regions follow suit? For the first time, there was a backlog of goods. The official in charge of this matter went to see Wuxia Xianxia and suggested whether Qiqian City could suspend the shipment or reduce the amount of goods. Otherwise, there would be problems if there were too many goods. Especially when some of the goods still had a shelf life. If they were not sold in time, it would be a big loss. Wuxia Xianxia did not seem to hear the suggestion of the official. Not only that, he also sent people to Qiqian City in the name of the governor to rush the goods. This was the confidence that Yang Qindong gave him. In the face of Wuxia Xianxia's actions, many officials expressed their puzzlement. Some of the more straightforward people began to write to Qiqian City, asking whether Wuxia Xianxia was capable of being the governor of Lao province. Chapter 608. The situation in Lao province began to change. The criticism of Governor Wuxia Xianxia was getting louder by the day. Yang Qindong, who recommended Wuxia Xianxia, did not say anything at this time, which made many officials puzzled. They even went to the palace in groups of 3 to 5 to meet the 6th young master and express their opinions. But no one was approved. In fact, Yang Qindong was no longer in Wanxiang City, let alone Lao province. How could he meet his subordinates? No one knew that the 6th young master had appeared in front of Shangding City, which was beside the Mekong River. Since things started here, let's start our attack from here. Yang Qindong sighed and looked at Shangding City, which was 5 miles away. He raised his arm gently and then put it down. Beside him, countless Ling Feng and auxiliary soldiers rushed toward Shangding City. Everything happened without warning. At noon, many soldiers of the Golden Bian dynasty were still basking in the sun on the tower. Suddenly, they saw the army green approaching from afar. Their brains short-circuited at the first moment, and then came up with an impossible idea. Enemy attack. No one knew who shouted first. Then, chaos broke out on the city gate tower. The soldiers began to look for bows and arrows and other long-range weapons. Shangding City, which had been peaceful for many years, was suddenly facing a ferocious beast. It was completely unprepared. Before the Ling Feng arrived, it was already in chaos. Close the city gate and send someone to Jujing City to ask for help. The centurion guarding the city shouted loudly. When he realized that no one listened to him, he simply went downstairs, found a fast horse, and rushed out of the city gate on the other side. The centurion's idea was simple. 300 miles behind him, there was a 100,000 army led by General Hun Sen in Jujing City. As long as he sent the message there, it would be a great achievement. It was still the same old saying. The idea was beautiful, but the reality was cruel. Just as the centurion rode out of the city and felt the wind whistling past his ears, he suddenly felt a pain in his chest and fell to the ground with a plop. Due to the inertia, the centurion was sent flying. When he landed on the ground, he was no longer breathing. It turned out that he had been shot in the chest. Since he had suddenly appeared and prepared for such a long time, how could Yang Qindong let the news leak out? When he gave the order to attack, all 4 gates of Shangding City were filled with mercenaries. Before the battle even started, Shangding City was already a dead city. The North City Gate was the main attack, while the other 3 city gates were the main defense. Anyone who rushed out, whether they were dignitaries, soldiers, or ordinary people, was greeted with whistling bullets. With a long spear in hand, who in the world could be his match? With strong fighting spirit and confidence, the mercenaries rushed into Shangding City from the North City Gate without encountering any decent resistance. Then there was a burst of intensive gunfire, and the massacre began. All the people of the Golden Rim dynasty who were still running around on the streets, no matter what their identities were suffering the wrath of the mercenaries. Gunshots came one after another. After only half an hour, the pungent smell of blood floated in the air and did not dissipate for a long time. The street was already full of corpses and rivers of blood, but the mercenaries still had no intention of stopping. Unless they stayed in their homes and did not go out, as long as they went out on the street, they would face a merciless massacre. The mercenaries had never done such a thing before, but this time they took advantage of the massacre of the Sorangan family on the Mekong River to launch a bloody revenge. The mercenaries wanted to use facts to tell the world and warn everyone how terrible it was to be their enemy, and how wrong it was to do so. The massacre lasted for 4 hours, and there was no one left on the street. They stopped and took a breath. The next work was done by the 20,000 Laotian mercenaries. They began to push the doors open one by one. They did not kill anyone, but just called out the surviving people and let them see the bloody scene while cleaning the battlefield. Almost all the Sorangs who were rushed out of their homes were pale, and then vomited. This scene would be imprinted in their minds, and they would never forget it. Clean up the battlefield, gather the valuable things, and arrange a team of 1,000 to drive the carriages back to Laos. Then drive all the people out of Shangding City. Rest for the night, and set off for Jianghu City tomorrow morning. Yang Qindong gave several orders in succession. He did not kill all the Phnom Penh people, but deliberately let a group of people go. He believed that these people would become the best mouthpieces. He believed that it would not take long for this bloody scene to spread throughout the Phnom Penh dynasty. He wanted to completely intimidate his opponents before the war began. He wanted to make their morale plummet, and at the same time, make them feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. In this way, when the two armies met, it would be easier for them to win the war. Jianghu City. It was one of the big cities at the north gate of the Sorangan dynasty. It was another big gate after Shangding City. At this moment, the city was full of soldiers. Not only in the city, but also outside the city, there were barracks. One after another, there seemed to be no end to it. Hun Sen's 100,000 troops were stationed here. According to the plan, Hun Sen was the vanguard to rush to Shangding City as soon as possible, then go up north along the Mekong River and directly attack Bansa City in Laos. However, the sudden news from Laos made Hun Sen hesitate. He did not forget King Boromir's advice before he came. This was the time to show his strength. It would be best if they did not have to fight the mercenaries. After all, when facing the powerful mercenaries, they had no advantage except for the number of troops. Now that an accident had occurred, Laos acted as if nothing had happened. Under such circumstances, if Hun Sen still took the initiative to attack the enemy's territory, it would not be defending the country, but provoking the enemy. This was tantamount to forcing the mercenaries to fight with them. This was definitely not what the king wanted to see, so Hun Sen stationed his army in Jianghu City without asking for permission and biding his time. He only sent someone back to Golden Rim City to ask for the king's orders. Hun Sen originally thought that as the vanguard, he would have to fight the mercenaries to the death, even at the cost of his own life. Unexpectedly, the mercenaries were scared, which made the 100,000 troops happy. During the time they were stationed, all the soldiers drank and ate meat every day. Anyway, the military budget was more than enough this time. Most of it was provided by the nobles, so it would be a waste not to eat and drink. They celebrated as if they had won the battle. Even Hun Sen did not say anything when he heard about it. He had been under a lot of pressure before, and now that the pressure was gone, it was time for the soldiers to relax. Because of this, Hun Sen gained the support of most of the soldiers, which made his popularity soar in a short time. He was almost on par with the first general, Dagon. Hun Sen was still immersed in his vanity, but he did not know that danger was approaching. The 2nd and 3rd regiments of the 1st Division of the Cold Front had arrived outside Jianghu City and were ready to launch a fierce attack. After marching for 2 days, they had covered 300 miles under their feet. Then they rested for an afternoon. When it was dark, the regiments, battalions, and companies began to slowly encircle the 100,000 vanguard troops of the Golden Rim dynasty according to their previous orders. The sky was dark, but the camp of the Golden Rim dynasty was as bright as day. Numerous bonfires were set up, and mutton was hanging on each wooden rack. Under the roasting fire, there was a crackling sound, and the aroma spread far and wide. As the vanguard general, Hun Sen sat on a temporary wooden mat, with good wine in front of him and beautiful women beside him. He drank one cup after another and laughed heartily. It was true that one should enjoy life to the fullest, and not let the golden cup be empty to the moon. Beside Hun Sen, there were some captains and kiliarchs. They used wooden mats to form a large circle. In the circle, 2 skilled soldiers were sparring with each other. Occasionally, there would be 1 or 2 weak soldiers in a strong army who were afraid of death. Similarly, in a weak brigade, there were also warriors with good skills. The 2 soldiers who were competing were the best in the Phnom Penh army. They each displayed what they had learned, and the wonderful performance of their fists on flesh attracted a burst of applause from other soldiers. "Huh, good. You're worthy of being the best in our vanguard. Come, reward them." Hun Sen was affected by the fierce fight between the 2 soldiers and shouted loudly. Then the soldiers beside him took the silver and gave it to the 2 warriors who were performing. The 2 warriors who got the silver quickly retreated and were replaced by others. Even if there were benefits, everyone should share them. The exciting fight here attracted even more soldiers to watch and cheer spontaneously. The aroma of the meat and the lively performance in front of the tent not only attracted the attention of most soldiers, but also many soldiers who were in charge of guarding the perimeter sneaked over. They did not think that this was a violation of military discipline, because they had heard that Laos was scared. They seemed to be afraid of the army of the Golden Rim dynasty, and they were deep in the country. How could the enemy appear here? Almost every soldier had the same idea. The army camp was chaotic, and military discipline was useless. This was the army camp of 100,000 soldiers. The night wind was still blowing. A danger that could decide their life and death was slowly approaching. However, not a single one of the 100,000 people was alarmed. They were still drinking, eating, chatting, and talking about things that interested them. Chapter 609. Young Master, these enemies are too weak. Our vanguard is 500 meters away from them, but they still haven't discovered us. Tiger's Mane put down the night vision telescope in his hand, shook his head, and seemed to be singing a lament for the enemy. Humph. An army without a sense of crisis will never be strong. Come on, send out the signal for the general attack. Yang Chendong's eyes flashed. The enemy's carelessness determined their next result. This was the so-called, you reap what you sow. Beta Persei, who had been waiting for a long time, turned around and shouted, let's start the general attack. Yang Er, who had a loud voice to begin with, let out a roar that sounded like the angry roar of the heavens. In an instant, his voice traveled several hundred meters. The second guard team was part-time artillery. After hearing the order, they immediately put the prepared shells into the barrel. Then, the 100mm mortar roared. After flashes of blazing fire flashed in the sky, it fell on the unprepared vanguard camp of the Golden Bien dynasty. Boom! Boom! There was no need to aim at any coordinates at all. Any cannonball that fell down would produce an earth-shaking sound. After every cannonball fell, there would be heart-wrenching screams and screams. Hong Sen, who was still tasting wine and looking at the beauty in his arms from time to time, suddenly felt the ground trembling, as if an earth dragon was about to turn over. Before he could figure out what was going on, huge flames appeared in his sight. He instantly lost his hearing and his mind stopped working at this moment. The only thing left was the scene of him opening his mouth and not making a sound. Kill! The mercenaries, who had already been in place, began to madly rush in from 4 directions. As they continued to move forward, bullets with fire were shot out from the barrel like a dense rain. With the help of the still burning bonfire, one could see the Golden Bien dynasty soldiers falling to the ground one after another. This was a massacre, without any suspense. From the very beginning of the war, the situation had been one-sided. Yang Chendong had carefully prepared for the war in Laos for nearly 4 months. With the overwhelming advantage of advanced firearms, the enemy's will to fight had crumbled in less than 15 minutes. The entire camp was filled with soldiers begging to surrender. War was such a miraculous thing. One could win against many with a few, defeat the strong with a weak force, and extinguish the flames of war that should have burned for a long time in an instant. In today's battle, at least 2 of the 3 aspects mentioned above were perfectly reflected. In a situation where their military strength was far inferior to the enemy's, due to their meticulous preparations and unparalleled pressure, the enemy was defeated without even putting up a decent resistance. One by one, they knelt on the ground, no longer as arrogant and insufferably arrogant as before. Originally, they thought that this battle would last until dawn or even longer. After all, there were 100,000 enemies here. Even if there were 100,000 pigs, it would be a laborious task to catch all of them. However, humans were often worse than pigs. At least pigs instinctively knew how to run when they saw danger, but humans would not because they had intelligence and brains and knew how to avoid danger. When they saw that there was no way to escape, they chose to surrender. Perhaps for some people, surrendering was shameful. But for the defeated soldiers, it was a very effective way to save their lives. In just over 4 hours, just after midnight, the 100,000 enemy soldiers were completely under the control of the mercenaries. They were all tied up with long ropes that had been prepared beforehand. Then, they were tied together like gourds. Their heads were lowered, and they looked like children who had done something wrong. Reporting to the 6th young master, the enemy camp has been controlled. More than 90,000 of them have been captured, 4,000 of them have been killed, and 5,000 have escaped. 2nd Regiment Commander Luo Pa walked in front of Yang Qindong and reported the results of the battle after a salute. Not seeing Wuxia report, Yang Qindong thought that he was injured and asked with concern, "Where is Regiment Commander Wu?" Reporting to the 6th young master, Regiment Commander Wu led the 1st Battalion to chase after the enemy. 3rd Regiment Political Commissar and 2nd Battalion Commander Chen Bo reported after Luo Pa. Chase after the enemy? They didn't catch Hun Sen. Yang Qindong's reaction was extremely fast. He immediately thought of a conclusion. Only when the enemy's main commander was escaping could Wuxia abandon his troops and choose to chase after him. Yes. This time, it was 2nd Regiment Commander Luo Pa who stood up to answer the question. At the beginning of the battle, the situation was too chaotic and some of the enemies escaped. I didn't expect Hun Sen to be among them. 6th young master, we ask for your forgiveness. 3rd Regiment also asks for forgiveness. Since Wuxia wasn't around, Political Commissar Chen Bo spoke on his behalf. What are you guilty of? Yang Qindong glared at them. You all have performed very well. It's normal for some of the enemies to escape in the chaos. We have limited manpower and can't defend against them. Besides, didn't Regiment Commander Wu chase after them? Maybe there will be some good news. Just as Yang Qindong finished speaking, a warhorse rushed over from afar. Then, he heard Wuxia's cursing voice. Damn it, your fighting ability is mediocre, but your escaping ability is top-notch. Fine, there's no need to guess. They must have failed to catch him. Sure enough, when Wuxia passed through the 1st and 2nd line of defense and arrived in front of Yang Qindong, he saluted with a black face. 6th young master, your humble servant is incompetent. We didn't catch Hun Sen. Did he really escape? Yang Qindong couldn't help but sigh. A vanguard general couldn't be underestimated. Otherwise, why didn't they catch 90,000 captives? Yes, he escaped. I chased after him with the 1st Battalion and killed more than 300 enemies. We also captured some captives, including Hun Sen's soldiers. They confirmed that he had escaped. Wuxia reported in a depressed tone. Then, Wuxia straightened his body. 6th young master, your humble servant requests to continue the chase with the 1st Battalion. No matter what, we have to kill this enemy general who looked down on us. Wuxia wasn't just saying. Before the battle, he had made a bet with the 2nd Regiment commander, Luo Pa, to see who could catch Hun Senator. He had never expected that it would end up like this. Well, there's no need to chase him. Besides, he can't run away. It won't be long before we kill our way into Phnom Penh City. At that time, we'll see how he can escape. As for now, immediately arrange for someone to send the captives back to Laos. There will be people there to meet you. 90,000 captives, and they're all strong laborers. I think Yu Qian will be very happy to receive them. Yang Qindong laughed. According to the intelligence, the entire Phnom Penh dynasty only had 400,000 soldiers, including 100,000 new soldiers. In one battle, they had destroyed a quarter of the enemy's forces. No matter how one looked at it, it was a great victory. Presumably, when the news spread out, many people would be blinded. The Battle of Jianghu was equivalent to a blow to the Phnom Penh dynasty. It proved that the mercenary regime was sacred and inviolable, but at the same time, it exposed their position. Obviously, it was not realistic to launch a sneak attack next. But even so, Yang Chendong and the mercenaries were still very confident in their abilities. Wasn't the reason why they trained as if their lives depended on it? Wasn't it so that they could perform better on the battlefield? Hun Sen escaped. Relying on the fact that his mount was of a better breed, he ran very fast. He only dismounted when the warhorse started foaming at the mouth. At this time, he could already see the walls of the next city, Chuanlong. The mercenaries suddenly appeared in the country and defeated the 100,000 vanguard led by Hun Sen and Zhu Jing. The captives were more than 90,000. After Hun Sen personally confirmed the news, the Chuanlong city guard sent the news to the capital, Phnom Penh City. Along with the news, there was also the fact that Shangbing City was breached and 30,000 civilians were slaughtered. This was all spread by the people who were deliberately released by the mercenaries. There was absolutely no question about its reliability. The two news spread one after another in the territory of the Phnom Penh dynasty, causing waves of panic among the people. The mercenaries were too powerful. In just a few days, they had conquered 2 cities, killed more than 100,000 people, and captured more than 100,000 people. Could the country's army defeat such an opponent? In Phnom Penh City, when the news arrived, it was not only the people who were panicking, but also some dignitaries. They knew that the mercenaries were very powerful. After all, this had been proven by the facts. Because of this, they took out their wealth to support the country's army, hoping that they could win the war with a generous reward. But now, reality had given them a big slap in the face. Everyone was silent at the same time. They also had doubts in their hearts. Was it right for them to support their country to go to war with the mercenaries? In the palace, the moment King Boromir received the news of the war, he sat there without moving for a long time as if he had been petrified. When he came back to his senses, he cursed. First, he scolded the mercenaries for not playing by the rules. They were clearly trying to keep the peace and were about to admit defeat. However, they suddenly sent out troops and caught them off guard with a sneak attack. Then, he scolded Hun Sen for his stupidity and incompetence. Hun Sen's 100,000 troops were completely defeated in less than 4 hours. How was he a vanguard general? He was clearly an idiot. When he thought about how this was caused by this person, he was even more furious. He could not wait to skin this person and pull out his tendons to relieve the hatred in his heart. He had cursed, but the situation would not change because of his curses. What to do next was ultimately up to him, the king. General Dagon, I will give you 150,000 soldiers to guard Chuanlong City. No matter what, you cannot let the mercenaries take a step forward. I will immediately send people to Siam and the Awad dynasty to ask for help. Since we are allies, they can't just stand by and watch us get beaten. Chapter 610. The alliance had become his last hope, and Boromov hoped that they would be willing to fight to the death and send troops to Laos. As long as they made a move, the mercenaries would be attacked from both sides. The mercenaries were likely to retreat. Then, it would be time for him to recover what he had lost and restore the prestige of the country. He quickly arranged for people to get reinforcements. Then, he fixed his eyes on Chuan Longcheng. Not only King Boromir, but many people in the entire Golden Border dynasty had their eyes on Chuan Longcheng. They wanted to see the result of the clash between the two armies. Would it be beneficial or disadvantageous? Laos. The news of the victory in the Battle of Jianghu City had finally spread. At first, it was just some gossip. There was no confirmation, but it had already shocked many nobles. Didn't they say that the mercenaries would not make a move? Didn't they admit defeat? Why did the battle start so soon? Before that, they did not receive any news at all. There was no lack of smart people among the nobles. They quickly remembered that the 20,000 Laotian mercenaries were transferred to the south. At that time, it was said that it was to eliminate bandits and to prevent the Golden Border Dynasty's army from pressing on the border. Now, it seemed that it was just an excuse. They were probably already on the battlefield at that time. The nobles had bribed many Laotian mercenaries. After all, these people were born here. They had too many concerns and too many shortcomings. However, it was obvious that these people were also kept in the dark. They did not know their mission until the moment before the battle. At that time, because of the tight lockdown, they could not send back the news. So, what did this mean? Did the mercenaries know that they would interfere and were already on guard? Or was it all because of military needs? If it was the latter, of course, it did not matter. It was understandable that the army needed to lock down the news. However, if it was the former, would the nobles be dissatisfied with their interference in the mercenaries' affairs? Would they even be the next target of punishment? These nobles were originally people who had lost their power. They had inherited too many things from their ancestors. In fact, they were already in dire straits. If the mercenaries stepped on them at this time, how could they resist? While these people were in a state of panic, the news that the mercenaries had conquered Shangding and Jujing, killing tens of thousands of enemies and capturing 90,000 enemies was reported to the Yang dynasty. For a time, all the Xianxia inns in the various cities were overcrowded. Many commoners squeezed into these inns to drink the free tea and listen to the literate people talk about the news over and over again. Their faces were filled with excitement and excitement. Under the influence of Yang Bao's public opinion, more and more people learned about the policies of Lao Province. As Lao Province's infrastructure was on the right track, more and more people had jobs and money to earn. Through the distribution of land to the rich, more and more people were able to live on land that belonged to them. As long as the people had land in their hands, they would feel at ease and satisfied. Although the Lao provincial government had only been established for a few months, it had already received the sincere support of many of the people. This time, when they learned that the mercenaries who were guarding the fruits of their victory had won a great victory, almost everyone was happy. If they won the war, it meant that the benefits in their hands would not be taken away at will. In front of a bright future, the Lan Sung kingdom could go to hell. In the past, this kingdom had not treated the people well. If they were allowed to kill their way back, wouldn't they return to the days when they did not have enough food to eat and clothes to keep warm? The people were the most direct in their actions. They did not care about right or wrong, good or bad. They only knew that if someone was good to them, they would be good to that person. Now that the Lao province's policies were on their side, naturally, they would side with the Lao province. In addition, there were the educated youths among them who were spreading the news every day. There were also the Han people who had gained more benefits from the war. Thus, the opinions of the people were surprisingly unified. In the afternoon when the news was published, at least 7,000 young people had signed up to join the army. They were using their actions to support the Lao provincial government. As the provincial governor, Wuxia Xianxia was very touched by the actions of the people. However, as a sub-province, there were strict regulations on the number of soldiers they could have. This was to prevent other provinces from secretly expanding. Thus, in the face of the enthusiasm of the people, Wuxia Xianxia personally received them at the square in front of the government building. He expressed his gratitude and stated that there was no shortage of people in the mercenary army. He also asked them to return first. If there was a need to recruit soldiers, Yang Baozhong would report it. As for the youths who did not want to join the army on a whim, he suggested that they sign up first to learn some basic military knowledge. If there was a need for soldiers, those with experience would naturally be given priority. After much persuasion, they finally managed to persuade more than 7,000 people to go back. This scene quickly spread throughout the entire Wanxiang city, causing many people to be shocked. In just a few short months, the Lao provincial government had already won the hearts of the people. It seemed like even the Lansang kingdom's most glorious period could not achieve this. With Luan Xiaoqian holding the fort and meticulous preparations, the provincial government was operating as usual. Other than continuously sending various war preparations to the front lines, they were fully focused on developing their businesses and infrastructure. Just like Crimson City, they were developing day by day. With the victory at the front lines, the nobles did not dare to make any sarcastic remarks and became much more obedient. The goods that were originally overstocked were also quickly sold out when the news of the victory at the front line spread. Since the mercenary army had expressed their determination to protect the merchant group, what else did they have to worry about? Even if they could not sell their goods to Phnom Penh, Siam, and Ava. But weren't there other countries and regions around them? Just Great Ming alone was a huge market, and it was enough for them to mess around. The merchants began to move. Every time they brought in goods, they would have to pay more tax. The money from the sale of goods could not be intercepted in Lao province, and all of it had to be handed over to Chien City after the transaction. However, the tax did belong to them, and they could use it to develop their businesses. Money made the world go round. The development of Lao province entered a faster track. However, in this era of rapid development, there was a sudden movement in Langkai City, which was south of Wanxiang City. The Siam Kingdom had sent out 200,000 soldiers and was about to attack the city. As the war progressed, the days passed, and Siam and Ava finally started to make their moves. This was especially so for Siam, whose territory was adjacent to Wanxiang City, where the Lao province government was located. When they received King Boromir's request for help, the higher-ups made the decision to send troops to Wanxiang City. King Ili Chi of Siam was a person with foresight. When Jiaoji was still around and sent troops to South Ming, his attention was already on this place. If not for the fact that he had to cross Lansang and Jiaoji to enter Great Ming, he would have already thought of sending troops to seize the resources of Great Ming. What happened next was beyond Ili Chi's expectations. Suddenly, a mercenary army appeared and defeated the seemingly strong Jiaoji. Then, the mercenary army took over Lansang and changed its name to Lao Province. This series of actions immediately made him feel nervous. Ili Chi was worried about the powerful military strength of the mercenary army. He was worried that they would use this opportunity to attack him. In all honesty, if he had such a powerful army, he would definitely not be soft-hearted. He would definitely raise his butcher's knife and slash down on the people and regions that he felt deserved it. He believed that he was not the only one who felt this way. The mercenary army would also feel the same way. Originally, he was thinking of how to fight his way out of this chaotic world, expand his territory, and create a great empire. However, the unexpected rise of the mercenary army forced him to give up on this idea. Instead, he thought of how to protect himself. This was the reason why Siam, Phnom Penh, and Ava formed an alliance. In other words, they felt the danger and huddled together to protect themselves. They were confident that with the alliance of the three countries, they would have considerable strength. Although it was not enough to destroy the mercenary army, it would at least make them feel pressured. What was unexpected was that not long after the alliance was formed, the Sorangan family incident occurred. While Ili Chi was scolding General Hun Sen for his stupidity, he was also paying close attention to the development of the situation. Fortunately, some news came not long after. The mercenary army suddenly stopped mentioning this matter, as if they had admitted defeat. However, why was his heart still unable to calm down? The facts proved that Ili Chi's intuition was right. On the surface, the mercenary army seemed to have admitted defeat. However, they had been gathering their forces secretly and launched an unexpected and swift attack. Not only did they occupy two big cities, but they also directly destroyed the 100,000 troops of the Phnom Penh dynasty. This weakened the strength of the enemy and showed the invincible and powerful side of the mercenary army. Ili Chi admired their actions, but at the same time, the pressure increased greatly. Today, the mercenary army was targeting the Phnom Penh dynasty. Would they target Siam tomorrow? Instead of letting the mercenary army approach step by step, it was better for them to take the initiative to attack, especially when the mercenary army was confronting the Phnom Penh army. If they suddenly attacked, their chances of winning would be much higher. Once they captured Wanxiang City, not only would they be able to obtain the wealth and various resources in the city, but it would also be tantamount to seizing the mercenary army's escape route. This would greatly relieve the pressure on the Phnom Penh dynasty. As for whether this would lead to the retaliation of the mercenary army. What a joke, they were already enemies. Was there a need to be afraid of such things happening? Siam's unannounced attack caused a wave of panic in Wanxiang City. The nobles who had become obedient began to move again. Some of them even began to secretly contact the special envoy sent by Siam. They seemed to have decided to side with the other party. Chapter 6:11. The higher-ups were in a state of panic. Some chose to contact the emissary to surrender, some were hesitant and wanted to wait and see. There were also those who firmly supported the emissary. For example, people like Long Qi and then Ong Si. As the governor of Laos, Yuan Shaochen saw all of this. In addition to constantly sending people to capture Siamese spies, he also made preparations to defend the city. Now, he had a company, 2 auxiliary battalions, and 10,000 Laotian mercenaries. If he used them well, it was not impossible to defend the city. Yuan Shaochen had no intention of asking Yang Qindong for help. He was the one who agreed to blow up the Solingans matter. Now that he could not control the situation, he had to look for the person behind him. The arrogant Yuan Shaochen would not do such a thing. He was actively preparing for the battle. He was also considering if he could send the 7,000 people who had signed up to the city tower. These people had already undergone 7 days of military training. Although they were still new recruits, they were not completely clueless. At least they knew what military orders were and what was forbidden. The situation in Wanxiang City became tense. However, most of the staff and officials of the provincial government were not afraid. They did not trust Governor Yuan, but they trusted the 6th young master. Since this battle was commanded by the 6th young master, he would not ignore the possibility of Siam sending troops. Now that the news had spread, it would not be long before the mercenary reinforcements arrived. Everyone seemed to believe that Yang Qindong would transfer the troops from Phnom Penh dynasty. However, after waiting for a long time, there was no news. As time passed, people began to waver. Below Chuanlong City, the main force of the mercenary army that everyone had placed their hopes on was now gathered. Yang Qindong was also standing in front of the temporary command center's sand table with a relaxed expression. He didn't seem worried at all because the attack in defense of Wanxiang City was about to begin. Are all the battalions and companies ready for battle? Yang Qindong retracted his gaze from the sand table and turned around to look at the 2nd Regiment commander of the IC Blade Division, 3rd Regiment commander Wu Sheng, and the Auxiliary Regiment commander Lu Zhua. Everything is ready. We can attack the city at any time, Luo Pa said excitedly on behalf of the other officers. After he finished speaking, a look of struggle and hesitation appeared on his face, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. What's wrong? If there's anything you want to say, just say it. How are you hesitating like a regiment commander? Noticing the change in Luo Po's expression, Yang Qindong stared straight at Luo Pa, as though he could see through his thoughts. Yes. Luo Pa straightened his body. 6th young master, there's news that the Siam Kingdom has sent their troops to attack Wanxiang City. Is that true? That's not something you need to worry about. You just need to fight this battle well. Even though Yang Qindong knew that the officers were concerned about the overall situation, Yang Qindong still rejected them without hesitation. One had to be single-minded when doing things. On the battlefield, a small mistake could lead to serious consequences. Since that was the case, there was no point in thinking about things that were beyond one's control. Yes. Luo Pa, who was criticized by Yang Qindong, replied with a straight face. He only wanted to remind the 6th young master. He also knew that the most important thing now was to defeat the Golden Bian dynasty's army. Luo Pa was criticized, but Yang Qindong knew that this was not his idea alone, but that all of the officers probably had the same idea. It seemed that if he did not say a few words, these people would inevitably be distracted, and it would be difficult for them to concentrate. Ah, well, young master has already made arrangements for Wanxiang City. You don't have to worry. If you're really worried, it's better to think about how to defeat the Golden Bian army quickly. As long as the war here is resolved, we can naturally turn back and give Siam a slap in the face. We'll let them know the consequences of provoking us. Yes, defeat Golden Bian and fight back against Siam. The regimental officers in the command center all said bluntly. Well, since everyone is ready, let's check our watches now. We'll launch the general attack in an hour. Yang Chendong raised his right arm, revealing the exquisite military watch on his wrist. At the same time, several regimental officers also looked at the military watch on their wrists. Chuanlong City. It was not a big city in the Golden Border dynasty, but because of its unique geographical location, beside the Mekong River and behind the Orange Well City, it became a strategic place and one of the front doors to enter the Golden Border city of the Golden Border dynasty. At this time, the 150,000 troops led by General Dan were guarding this place. General Hun Sen, who had retreated to this place, had been kidnapped and sent back to Golden Bian dynasty. 100,000 defeated soldiers, this was a crime that this general would have to bear. Once Hun Sen was punished, Dan's influence and strength in the army would rise to a new level. After all, no one would compete with him, and he would be worthy of being the boss. The army entered the city and took over the defense line of the entire city. Dagon also became the boss of the city. After inspecting the defense of the city tower, he returned to his temporary residence and called for a group of singers to sing a song. He crossed his legs and looked very leisurely. He had figured out the situation of the mercenaries these days. At most, there were only about 40,000 people. Their military strength was more than 3 times that of the enemy. With a strong city to defend, what was there to be afraid of? Even if the other party had some advanced firearms and cannons, he was not someone to be trifled with. He had already arranged for an inspection team of 10,000 people. As long as the soldiers did not flee, he was not afraid of the mercenaries with his advantage in numbers. Of course, what gave Dan confidence was that Siam had already sent troops. Now, he only needed to delay the main force of the mercenaries, and it would be a great victory. Once the Allies succeeded, the mercenaries would have no choice but to retreat. Now, his mission was to defend Longchuan City, and it would be a victory. The terrain here was very good. The west gate was next to the Mekong River, and the army could not be stationed there. The south gate led to the hinterland of the Golden Bian dynasty, and there would be no enemies. So, he only needed to defend the north and east gates. When the time came, the mercenaries would retreat, and it would be a victory. As for whether the enemy would attack the 2 gates, he would deal with it as it came. With such a thick city wall and so many soldiers, the enemy could not fly up. Besides, even if they relied on the advantage of the cannons to enter the city, so what? When the 2 sides fought, the power of the cannons would be limited. Then, it would be time for the enemy to counterattack with the advantage of numbers. Dan was very satisfied, especially after he kidnapped Hun Sen and sent him back to Golden Bian City. No one in the army could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. The feeling of being completely at ease, and the momentum of being a man of his word, made him feel like he was floating in the air. It was as if the world was in his hands. This feeling lasted until suddenly, the ground under his feet shook, and then it disappeared. Boom, 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 boom. Under the attack of the cannons, the entire Longchuan city was shaking. Some tiles on the houses fell to the ground like rain. The people in the streets were frightened by the loud roar, and they ran around like headless flies. It seemed that this was the only way to reduce the fear in their hearts. Reporting to the general, the mercenaries have started to attack the city. The north gate has been breached. Dan was also frightened by the deafening sound. Just as he got up and walked out of the courtyard, a guard knelt in front of him and reported a piece of unexpected bad news. What? The north gate has been breached? Dan felt like he was hit by a huge rock. He felt his vision turn black, and his legs went soft, and he was about to fall to the side. Fortunately, the guard reacted quickly and reached out to support him. General, what are you shouting for? I'm not dead yet. Don woke up from the shaking and shouted, immediately send reinforcements to the north gate according to the plan. No matter what, we must take back the gate. At this moment, Don realized that he had underestimated the enemy. He originally thought that the mercenaries were powerful because their opponents were too weak. Otherwise, why would they launch a sneak attack against the 100,000-strong army led by Hun Sen? If they really had the strength, why didn't they fight a fair and square battle? On the battlefield, underestimating one's opponent meant paying a heavy price. It could even be the price of one's life. After shouting these words, Don looked at the guard who was still standing in front of him and could not help but be angry. Go and pass the order. At the same time, order the inspection team to block the enemy. Anyone who deserts will be killed. The army of the Golden Bien dynasty moved slowly. Under the general's order, tens of thousands of soldiers went straight to the north gate, trying to regain control of it. At the north gate, it was Chang Chunyang of the 3rd Battalion of the 3rd Regiment who attacked. He had just taken up the post of battalion commander not long ago, and this time, he was given the opportunity to lead the charge. Not only did he have the 400 cold vanguard warriors from the 3rd Battalion, there were also 2 auxiliary battalions, totaling more than 1,000 people. Under the accurate bombardment of the 100mm mortar, the north gate was broken like a piece of paper. Then, with a fierce charge, they arrived at the north gate. At this moment, the field of vision became wider. Battalion commander, the enemy is going to counterattack, and they have a lot of people. The commander of the 1st Battalion, Guofeng, smiled. During the charge just now, their company was the vanguard of the vanguard. They were the first to reach the north gate, so they killed the most enemies. However, it seemed that this did not satisfy him. He held a machine gun and fired from time to time. Looking at his capable subordinate with a murderous expression, Chang Chunyang smiled and asked, "What's wrong? Did the battle just now scare you? There are thousands of enemies here. You killed so many people, are you still not satisfied?" Chapter 6:12. You want to scare me with a 1,000-man team? Battalion commander, I'm not bragging. Our company is the strongest. Even if we face a 10,000-man team, we won't frown. Guofeng said with some pride, and then half a magazine of bullets shot out. Hundreds of meters away, at least 4 or 5 enemies were knocked down to the ground. You're good. Since that's the case, then I'll allow you to continue charging. There are only 10,000 people on the other side now. I'll leave them all to you. Looking at Guofeng's boastful look, Chen Yangyuan wanted to kick him. But in the blink of an eye, he decided to provoke him and give him a slap in the face. Of course, Guofeng was bragging. 100 against 10,000, even if they had a powerful flintlock in their hands, it was difficult to do. Not to mention that the enemy was still carrying out a planned charge. Occasionally, the enemy's inspection team could be seen behind the army. With such a great achievement, the company dare not enjoy it alone. It's better to let the wise battalion commander lead us. Guofeng knew that he was bragging, but he didn't care. Instead, he said with a flattering look. In any case, they would often joke about such things in private. Humph, Chen Yangyuan snorted and didn't expose Guofeng's embarrassment. Instead, he said with a very serious expression, no matter how many enemies come, we have to kill them all. As long as we attract enough firepower from the enemy, the pressure on the commander's side will be reduced, and the faster it will be. Yes. When it came to serious matters, Guofeng also put away his cynical expression. He turned around and shouted to the soldiers around him while firing his gun, "Fire for me, don't be afraid of wasting bullets, and don't let the enemy counterattack. Shoot!" Bang bang bang, da-da-da, tut-tut-tut, all sorts of gunshots rang out, representing the sounds made by different firearms. Thousands of tongues of fire spewed out together, suppressing the enemy's charging force in an instant. When the soldiers of the Golden Bien dynasty fell down as if they were blown by a hurricane, the momentum of the attack began to slow down. Knowing that they would die if they rushed forward, no one would not cherish their lives. If it weren't for the inspection team behind them, they would have turned around and fled long ago. Gunshots were still ringing out from the north gate, and the soldiers of Chuanlong City were rushing towards the north gate to provide reinforcements. It was as if they would not stop until they had taken back the north gate. While everyone's attention was on the north gate, the attack on the east gate began. Unlike the north gate where there was only one cold vanguard battalion, the one leading the charge at the east gate was the 3rd Regiment commander, Wu Sheng. This time, he had brought 2 main battalions, 4 auxiliary battalions, and 5,000 Laotian mercenaries. His goal was to charge into the city in one go to crush the enemy's morale and destroy their will to fight. The mission Yang Qindong gave them was to be like an arrow piercing through the clouds, tearing the enemy's defensive line in half, paving the way for the main force to enter the city. In order to better complete the 6th Young Master's mission, Commander Wu Sheng and Political Commissar Chen Bo decided to split up after a discussion. First, the 3rd Battalion, Spring Sun, would take down the north gate and attract the enemy's main force. Then, they would rush into the east gate and catch the enemy off guard. It seemed that this was the only way they could successfully enter the city and carry out the mission. Otherwise, if there were too many enemies, and they were all blocked together, it would be impossible to open a path in front of a sea of people. The plan went very smoothly. While the north gate was busy fighting, the attack on the east gate began. Furthermore, under the careful planning of the 2 main battalions, when the 40-0 rocket launchers directly smashed open the north city gate, Wu Sheng led the mercenaries and charged in like an avalanche. Everyone was filled with murderous intent, and everyone rushed forward. The guns in their hands were constantly spewing flames, and they were like gods who had descended from the heavens. Whenever an enemy was in their line of sight, they would be hit by bullets as soon as they raised their swords and rushed forward. They would either die immediately or fall to the ground and cry out in pain. Along the way, they looked down on everyone. No one was their match, and no one could stop them. Dagon had already put on his armor and rushed to the north gate under the protection of a group of bodyguards. Before he reached the city, a messenger reported that the east gate had been breached. Quickly send people to block the east gate. Don't let any enemy enter the city. With the previous example of blocking the north gate, Dagon did not panic. In his opinion, even if he had to use human lives, he could still chase the mercenaries out of the city. At this moment, Dagon did not fully value the mercenaries. Or rather, he did not see the true strength of the mercenaries. He really thought that it was an ancient war where he could rely on numbers to turn the tide. He did not know that unless he could stop the mercenaries' charge in one go, the appearance of the mercenaries would only be a tactic of filling the gap. It was not effective at all. The battle at the east gate was far more intense than the north gate. One was defense, the other was offense, one was support, and the other was the main force. The situation was completely different. Before they could figure out the mercenaries' true intentions, groups of Golden Border Dynasty troops rushed to the east gate and were eliminated one by one. When they sent out a 100-man team, they would be wiped out. When they sent out a 1,000-man team, they would be heavily injured. When the 2,000 inspectors arrived, all they saw was a street full of corpses and injured people lying on the ground. What they saw was the main force of the 2nd Regiment of the Cold Vanguard charging towards them with guns in hand. Attack! Seeing that another group of enemies had appeared, and there were quite a number of them, Political Commissar and 2nd Battalion Commander Chen Bo took the lead. He held the 95 style in his hand and activated the burst mode. As he strode forward, he kept pulling the trigger. As soon as the inspection team saw the situation clearly and was about to turn around and retreat, intense gunshots rang out. The 2,000 people instantly scattered like a beehive that had been poked, leaving behind hundreds of corpses on the ground. In just one encounter, hundreds of corpses were left behind. This kind of strong combat power gave the inspection team a feeling of invincibility. In the past, others had always been in the front. Now that it was finally their turn, they felt the horror and strength of the mercenaries. Waves of enemies appeared at the east gate one after another and were crippled one after another. Finally, it attracted Don's attention. He began to mobilize more and more soldiers to rush to the east gate. He was delusional to use the tactic of numbers to drive the mercenaries out of the city. Guns are very powerful, but they will run out of gunpowder eventually. Don't be afraid, just rush forward. As long as you can kill one enemy, you will be rewarded with 10 taels of silver. As long as you snatch a gun, you will be rewarded with 100 taels of silver. Afraid that the soldiers below would not use their full strength, Don led his men to the east gate while constantly raising the bounty. He believed that under the stimulation of profits, there would definitely be people who did not care about their lives. As long as these people could rush to the front of the mercenaries, it would be time for their cold weapons to shine. When there is a great reward, there will always be brave men. This was undoubtedly a wise saying. Some people who chose to join the army were putting their lives on the line. They were already prepared to die. As the saying went, wealth comes from danger. In order to fight for a better future, many soldiers rushed toward Wuxing's second platoon like moths to a flame. Bam bam bam. Tat tat tat, the sound of gunshots continued. One by one, the enemies fell in the path of the charge. However, the momentum did not seem to have any intention of stopping. Many people were still moving forward with the help of their comrades' shadows. I only have one magazine left. When a cold vanguard warrior reached for his waist, he suddenly felt nothing and shouted subconsciously. I only have one magazine left too. I have 2 more. I don't even have one left. A cacophony of voices rushed into Wuxing's ears. While his face turned bitter, he could not help but turn around and shout, "Who told you to waste bullets like this?" Wuxing could not be blamed for saying this. Before the battle, every soldier had at least 2 basic sets of ammunition. For example, the 95 gun had 600 rounds of ammunition, a total of 20 magazines. At first, they thought it would be enough. Who would have thought that they would run out of ammunition so quickly? All right, everyone, save your bullets. At the same time, equip your bayonets and prepare for close combat. Political Commissar Chen Bo also shook his head helplessly. There were too many enemies. From the moment they entered the city until now, they only had about 2,000 people, including the auxiliary soldiers. However, they had to face dozens of waves of enemies in turns. At least 20,000 to 30,000 enemies had been driven away, defeated, or killed by them. With such a glorious victory, it was reasonable that they did not have enough bullets. However, even if they did not have enough bullets, they could still fight in close combat. With their bone-deep training, they could even kill with cold weapons. The enemies would be terrified of them. Equip your bayonets. Commander Wuxing also knew that the situation was a bit critical. It was not the time to blame anyone, so he shouted loudly. Then he took out the bayonet from his waist and inserted it into the 95 gun. Suddenly, a flash of white light appeared, like a soldier standing in a standard military posture, majestic. Kill. As he sprinted forward, he fired the last bullet in his magazine. Wuxing led the 1st Battalion, 2nd Battalion, for support battalions, and 5,000 Laotian mercenaries as they charged forward. Rows of bullets were fired, and the enemies fell to the ground one after another. The morale of the Golden Bian Dynasty soldiers, who wanted to take the opportunity to fight for their lives, dropped, and then they quickly retreated. The people running at the front were better off, but the enemies running at the back were in trouble. They didn't even have the chance to turn around before the mercenaries caught up with them. Then, one by one, the enemies exposed from behind were stabbed by bayonets and fell to the ground, covered in blood. You're tuning in to the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.